Welcome into another PFF college football review show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton and Wasserman here, breaking down the biggest results from a wild final weekend of the 2024 college football regular season. So Dalton, the playoff picture starting to get a little clearer, a little bit at least. We still have conference title weekend that's going to decide the entire of the top 12, but starting to get a little clearer as we go into the conference title weekend.
I think it's pretty clear. I think you're talking about, I think it's 14 or 15 teams alive in this thing. I think you talk about, I think especially the SMU-Clemson game could have a lot of consequence in the ACC title game. But you know what else I learned this weekend? If you plant a flag on my side of the desk, you're getting swung at. That's what I learned. I didn't know it was this much of a craze until this year, and maybe this is the first year of it. But, man, apparently flags are just the most offensive thing on the planet.
Former PFFer Brad Spielberger had a great tweet, and he said, Baker Mayfield planting a flag at Ohio State caused thousands of punches to be thrown today. So that whatever that happened, 8 years ago, that caused thousands of punches today.
Only Baker.
Yeah, dude.
So influential.
It's not only Michigan, Ohio State, where pepper spray, we'll get into that game in a second, pepper spray is used by the police, which is insane in itself. But you got that. I think Florida State also had flag planting.
North Carolina,
Arizona State, a Sun Devil planted the pitchfork.
Well, did you see the better part of that one? Did you see the two mascots fighting in that game?
No, that's not from this year.
That's not from this year?
No. It's from a previous year.
They kept showing it like it was this year.
I know, yeah. You got duped. That
was better than the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight.
This is how you know Dalton is very young on social media, because you got duped. That was an old video. Yeah, that's an old video. It's still real.
That's terrible.
It's real. It did happen, but it happened like a few years.
It was a yearly tradition.
No, it happened like a few years ago.
That's awful.
No, they were swinging. That was like a full-on fight between. Like usually the mascots when they do those fights, like, oh, it's like a fake fight. Like no, those guys were actually swinging. I think it was actually a real fight in that one. I saw the same video you did.
Just happen to do it every year.
But yeah, just to remind you guys what we're doing here on the review show. We're going over all the PFF grades from all of these games that we're talking about today. Also going over the stat that tells the story in all these games, the most impressive part of all these games. And at the very end of the show, we're going to show you what we think the updated college football playoff picture should be. Before we get started, Dawn, we've got to talk about the insane sale that we've got going on over at PFF. We have 35% off your PFF Plus subscription using the code SCORE35. Use it today. It ends tomorrow on Cyber Monday as well. So you only have 48 hours left to use this code. So definitely use this code right now. You get access to all of our player grades and premium stats that we'll talk about today for all of the college football games. Also available for all of the NFL games as well, where Dalton and Trevor go over the NFL slate tomorrow on the PFF NFL show. Subscribe to that channel as well if you haven't already. All the fantasy and betting tools that we have that are the best on the planet. Access to our 2025 NFL mock draft simulator. You can draft 7 rounds for your favorite team or all 32 NFL teams. You can trade picks, you can trade players as well. Really make yourself the GM of your favorite team. And all, of course, premium content you can find only with a PFF Plus subscription. So again, SCORE35. You can get that for 35% off your PFF Plus subscription from now until tomorrow, essentially. So use it right now because you're running out of time to take advantage of an insane sale right now. And then Dawn, after the sale's over, we're jacking it up to 300%. So 3 times the normal price, and I will be pocketing all of the leftover profit.
What are you selling it on the street?
I'm selling it on the black market for 300%.
Syracuse gets one big win, and now you're getting high.
No, I'm getting high and mighty. I'm getting high and mighty now because it was an
unbelievable
great day for Max Chadwick. I'll say that way.
This is why we don't let Max with the sales team. This is exactly why he doesn't know good business.
Great day for Max Chadwick, Dalton, because it's the first 2 games we're talking about. Because Ohio State lost to Michigan yesterday. The number 2 team in the country lost to a 5-loss Michigan team, 13-10. And because Ohio State lost and Penn State beat Maryland, Penn State is going to the Big Ten championship game. Before we get to the grades and stats of the story, one stat that's insane, Dawn, and credit to Longhorn Nation, credit to Trevor Sycamore for sending this in our chat last night. In the 2021 Ohio State recruiting class, so basically guys that are in their 4th year right now in college, Quinn Ewers is the only member of that Ohio State recruiting class that has beaten Michigan. And he didn't do it at Ohio State. He did it this year at Texas when we actually were at that game, at the Michigan-Texas game.
Moment we were there for.
We were there, and that was the last time an Ohio State recruiting class member in that 2021 class beat him, because obviously everyone else is 0-4 against Michigan. insane, considering Ohio State was, a 23-point favorite or something like that against Michigan?
The biggest upset in the series history.
Dude, one of the biggest upsets of the entire season as well. So let's go over the grades from what was a massive, massive upset in college football yesterday. Starting off with Michigan and their superstar, Mason Graham, 89.1 grade. So Colson Loveland was out yesterday. Will Johnson was out yesterday. They still have a first-round pick, though, in Mason Graham, and he played like it, man. He was dominant out there. We'll talk about him in just a second. Miles Hinton, the offensive tackle, though, 83 grade. Cornerback Amir Hall, 82.7. Defensive tackle Kenneth Grant, another potential first-round pick, 81.3. TJ Guy, the edge defender, 75. And then Davis Warren with a 68.3 grade at quarterback. Let's go over to Ohio State with their highest grade players. Linebacker Arvell Reese, 91.2. Edge defender Jack Sawyer, 88.6, who got into it a lot after the game was over as well. Caleb Downs with a 76th grade. Tyreek Williams, 74.1. Cody Simon, 74. And then Will Howard with a 59.1 grade against Michigan. Dalton, for you, what was that whole story?
Okay, so I'm actually going to go with the obvious one that's been thrown out there for the last 24 hours. What is it? We've heard that it's 23 meetings in a row that the leader in rushing yards in this matchup has won the game. Well, that was the case again. Michigan, 172 rushing yards, 4.1 per carry, and it's nothing flashy, but that's been Michigan football this year. As they drag you into the mud, they slow the game down, they run the football, they play great defense, and they hope to win a game 13-10 or 17-13. We saw it in the USC game. We've seen it in a couple of their other games. In the Ohio State game now, Michigan got to play their style of football, and this Ohio State running game has been a problem for several weeks, really ever since, going back to the Oregon game when they didn't run the ball well in that game. Only 77 rushing yards in this game, 3 per carry. And I think, and you're going to get more into this in a second, is they just got dominated in the trenches.
Yep.
And look, passing game, running game, Will Howard, I think what you have is every time we've watched Ohio State dig themselves out of a hole, right? The Penn State game, the Indiana game early, even some other times, they've gone to tempo, they've gotten the ball to the perimeter. This became, because of their offensive line injuries, a perimeter-oriented team that gets the ball out in space to their playmakers. They didn't do that in this game. They weren't able to do that in this game. Will Howard threw 2 interceptions. They didn't get a whole lot of yards after catch. And when they had to run the football with Quinshon Judkins or Travion Henderson, it just didn't happen. And I don't think it's any coincidence that their 3 lowest rushing grades this season, the Michigan game, loss, the Oregon game, loss, the Nebraska game, almost lost.
Yeah.
If they can't run the ball, and it appears right now over the last 6-7 weeks that they can't run the ball very effectively, look, they're one-dimensional, and Will Howard's had a great season, but Will Howard was never expected to carry this team to a national title. Now, it seemed like for the last 5-6 weeks that he was playing like maybe he could be the guy, but if you're one-dimensional and you're Ohio State and your offensive line is struggling and you can't run the ball, I think you're in serious jeopardy of not winning a national title the way their offense is functioning right now.
How insane is it that Ohio State's offense is one-dimensional and is throwing the football? Preseason, all we were talking about, dude, this backfield is all-time. Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, 2 of the top 5 or 6 running backs in America. And listen, I mean, they've really struggled this year, and the offensive line's really struggled as well. And we at PFF have been preaching this from the rooftops for years, even decades now. If you don't have a good O-line, your running game's not going to be very good.
Don't matter.
Exactly. So 43.2 offensive line grade. That's my stat that tells the story here. Dalton, I said in the preview, the only way that Michigan can keep this game even close is if their defensive line dominated. Now, I'll even admit, I didn't think Michigan could win this game even if the D-line dominated. But they won this game because the D-line was that freaking good out there. Ohio State had a 45.7 pass blocking grade, 46.3 run blocking grade. They allowed a pressure on 42% of their dropbacks, only averaged 0.6 yards before contact per carry as well. And Will Howard, as he's been all year, not great under pressure. He had a 36.1 passing grade under pressure against Michigan in this game. And I said it before with Josh Simmons, your left tackle, your star left tackle right now is a first-round prospect on our big board. Seth McLaughlin, a really good center for them as well. With them out for the season, this O-line is by far the team's biggest weakness. And Dalton, you can make an argument, they're really kind of down their 3 best offensive linemen because your star left guard, Donovan Jackson, is playing completely out of position at left tackle. So you're neutralizing your best remaining offensive lineman in Donovan Jackson while also missing Josh Simmons, while also missing Seth McLaughlin as well. Since week 7, when Josh Simmons suffered that injury, Dalton, They have a 55.6 offensive line grade. That's 118th in college football. There's 134 teams. It's one of the 20 worst offensive lines in the nation since Josh Simmons got hurt. If they don't win the national title, it's not going to be because of Will Howard. And trust me, he was not good yesterday. I'm not saying that. It'll be because this O-line is destroyed by injuries and now is playing like one of the worst in the country.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good defensive fronts in the playoff, right? When you talk about, you have Oregon, you have Penn State, you have Georgia in their defensive line, you have Tennessee. I mean, almost even Indiana, if they play them again. I thought Indiana's defensive line played well in the first game. Again, the offense and the special teams put their defense in bad spots. Part of the theme of a lot of this 12-team playoff is going to be really good defensive fronts. And if you can't block, none of the rest of it matters. Doesn't matter who your skill players are. Doesn't matter who your running backs are. Your quarterback's going to be under pressure. You can't win a national championship with an offensive line playing the way they're playing. And like you mentioned, we have evidence of this since week 7. This is not a last week or two thing. No. This is not a facing Michigan thing or maybe 1 or 2 bad matchups. This is, what now, 7 weeks. I think 7 games of this ever since, because Josh Simmons got hurt early in that Oregon game. Ever since that happened, it's been a mess. It's not just been average or like shaky. It has been a mess. It's one of the 10 worst offensive lines in the Power 4 right now, and I think probably they're the team in the playoff that feels the least settled up front, and it's going to be a serious problem having to work around it.
And imagine if Simmons and McLaughlin didn't get hurt. Like, Will Howard is so good when he's kept clean now. It becomes like a team that's like really hard to beat in Ohio State.
I think we might still be talking about the best team in the country.
Yeah, dude, it's just crazy that they could have beat Oregon too, because the O-line had issues in that Oregon game. They could have beat Oregon. They could have been 12-0 right now. Going to next week.
It's all the way around. It's not just pass blocking or run blocking. It's all the way around, and it's the thing that could sink them.
Absolutely, yeah. It was brutal. We'll talk about some other guys in just a second that contributed to that. But Dalton, for you, the most impressive part of this Michigan victory.
So there's obviously a theme here with our 2 most impressive guys, but I'll start with the big guy in the middle, big 78, Kenneth Grant. Look, 4 tackles, 4 pressures, 80.2 run defense grade. He's a huge part of it when you're talking about. That's what I was worried about, was that matchup at center with Carson Hinsman, and you're talking about Kenneth Grant being in the A-gaps every play. He's a problem. He's a problem any week. 87.5 run defense grade this season, just proving why he's a potential first-round pick. One of the best run stoppers in the country, a good interior pocket pusher, and he did everything for them in this game. And I know you have another guy who's going to go even higher than him in the draft, but no, I mean, that's the story, is Michigan dominated in the trenches. I'll take Kenneth Grant, and I know you have the other one here because, I mean, it is the story, and it's in almost any game Michigan has won this season. These guys inside, and Josiah Stewart and Derek Moore on the outside, even TJ Guy's been really good. It's the best defensive line in the country, and repeatedly they proved it. Without this defensive line playing at this level, they're nowhere near 7-5 even.
No, not even. They wouldn't make a bowl game without this D-line. They wouldn't. And my guy is missing Graham, obviously. And Dalton, I'm not saying it's as good as this performance, but what he did and what Kenneth Grant did as well reminded me a lot of a few years ago what Aiden Hutchinson did when he single-handedly beat Ohio State. He did. He had like 15 pressures against Ohio State. He almost won the Heisman off that game as well. Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant weren't that good, but they won this game for Michigan just like Aiden Hutchinson did a few years ago for Michigan in that game as well. He showed why he's the best D-tackle in college football and why he and Kenneth Grant are the best D-tackle duo in college football. 89.1 grade, 5 run defense stops on only 21 snaps with a tackle for loss as well. He destroyed Ohio State's interior offensive line, especially as a run defender. I think he had like 1 pressure in the game. So not really a lot as a pass rusher, but as a run defender, he was unblockable, honestly. And I think Mason Graham showed why he's the best D-tackle in the country, why we were so high on him entering the year, and why, Dalton, he should be, even though he's a D-tackle, he should be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft.
Absolutely. I think he's, and I said this about Joe Alt last year, and I'll say it with Mason Graham, I think he's the safest pick in the entire draft. Yeah. I think he's a guy, you know exactly what you're getting. I think he's a borderline lock to be a top 10 defensive tackle in the league, and it's because of that, his ability to make an impact in the run game or as a pass rusher. And I think we saw him do that against Washington last year in the national title game. His impact as a run defender, just incredible. He's just a terrific football player. I think as safe a projection to the NFL as you can make. And on any given field he stepped on this year, he's really been the best player.
Absolutely. So massive win for Michigan. Also most impressive, Dave Sofaro for calling this out. All week he's been saying how they're going to beat Ohio State. I know he's a Michigan guy and all that, but he did call it, and they did beat Ohio State. So big shout out to Dave Sofaro as well for...
Look, when you go out on a football field and you're the more physical team, you have a shot.
Yeah,
you have a shot either to greatly annoy the opponent or to win it like this, and that's what happened. Michigan once again for the fourth year in a row, dominated in the trenches, and that was the first reason they won.
So I don't want to talk about job security for anyone on the show or anything like that, but let's talk about Ohio State's season as well, because listen, it's not over yet. They're in the playoff. Even with this loss to Michigan, even with them not making the Big Ten title game, they're in the playoff, and most likely hosting a playoff game as well. So they're not done yet. So I wanted to ask you, what is the minimum for Ohio State to do in the playoff for it not to be a failure of a season for them?
I think you have to make the Final Four.
I didn't even think
I think that would have been at least the standard in the previous era with, making the Final Four. Now it's different there because, you didn't beat Michigan again, and I know that's the added thing with this job where it's like, you have to win national titles, but you also have to beat Michigan, and they're kind of treated.
There's some fans who want Michigan more than national titles.
They're kind of treated equally important at times. I think you make the Final Four, and you still feel okay about it. I don't know. It's tough because there's such a high standard there that it's hard for even me to put into perspective. What I might feel like is or isn't a failure, they feel a whole lot different. So I'm not an Ohio State person by any means. So to me, I think if they were to get to the Final Four, especially with this offensive line situation, I'd go, the problem is this is also the team that was supposed to do it, right? Yeah. They're going to lose 90% of these guys.
Oh, the entire defense is gone.
The entire Caleb Downs. Yeah, I mean, you're going to lose. You said 10 out of 11 starters.
Pretty
I
much.
think you told me, and then you're going to lose a lot of talent on offense too.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to rebuild this whole thing. It's going to be a young team next year. So if they don't win a national title this year, it might be a couple years before we see them do it, because this was supposed to be, what did they keep calling it? The best team that money could buy, and
quite literally,
it doesn't just work like that. You still have to go out there and execute.
If they beat Michigan, I would have agreed and said Final Four. Now I think they got to make the national title game at this point, where it's like, dude, you spent over $20 million on this roster. $20 million. You brought in the Avengers this year. You brought back everyone essentially, besides Marvin Harrison Jr., which you could not expect him to come back. He's a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. You brought back basically everyone else. You brought in Quinshon Judkins. You brought in Caleb Downs. You brought in Will Howard. You brought in Seth McLaughlin. You brought in Chip freaking Kelly from UCLA, who's the head coach there. Now he's your OC, and you're still coming up short. I think they got to make the national title game. I really do. I think there's a lot of fans right now who already want Ryan Day gone. He's obviously going to be able to coach the playoff as well. Dude, you got to make the national title game at least at this point.
Yeah, look, the only thing they can do internally is take it 1 week at a time.
Yeah.
That's all they can do, is that they're still in the playoff. They're still likely to get a home game, I think, especially with their resume, but 1 week at a time. That's all you can do. You can't look ahead to how far we're getting before you play, because if you do that and you feel like, we have to win or make the national title game, and then you get in the first round, you're thinking about that. I don't care what anybody says about, if it's 12 seed, 11 seed, whoever they're playing. We've seen it. We saw it in this game. Don't overlook your opponent.
No, absolutely not. And their next game is a playoff game. So you got to bounce back. You got a couple weeks before you got to play that game. You got to bounce back pretty quickly because you got that next game as a playoff game. So, yeah, Dalton, it's pretty crazy right now. And I know we're talking about how, the coaching carousel is going to be quiet this year. Well, if that job opens up, that is maybe the biggest job in college football.
It's going to get loud real quick.
That's a big one. But Michigan, obviously, massive win for them. And how about, I know we spent a lot of this game, but I know this is the biggest game of the weekend. How about Michigan's last 2 weeks, dude? They beat Northwestern. They scored 50 points. They beat Ohio State for the fourth straight year, and nobody thought they could do it besides Dave Safaro. And they got Bryce Underwood coming in next year, the number 1 player in the country. Hell of a last couple of weeks for Sherwin Moore, and what's been a rough season for him, honestly.
Keep building on it.
Yeah.
Keep building on it. I'll tell you what, they walk out of this year feeling really good.
They absolutely do. So Michigan, for the 4th straight time, taking down Ohio State despite being more than 20-point underdogs. Next game, Dawn. Another game that's been great for one of my teams, Syracuse, taking down number 6 Miami 42-38, and we knew it was going to be a shootout, and it absolutely lived up to it in the Dome. Let's talk about the highest grade players, starting off with the Syracuse Orange. Jackson Meeks with an 84 grade, Trevor Pena 82.4, LaQuint Allen 81.2, safety Jaden Bellamy 71.7, defensive tackle Elijah Fuente Cundiff 69.3, and of course the highest grade player was Kyle McCord, 90.9 grade, who's living very well because Ohio State lost his former school to Michigan once again when he left there, and everyone thought it was his fault, and just took down Miami as well. So great day for Kyle McCord yesterday. Did you see the quote from him where he's like, everything comes full circle? After someone asked him about the Ohio State game, he's like, yeah, everything comes full circle.
Sure did.
So yeah, Kyle McCord played great yesterday. Miami, their highest grade players, Wide receiver Xavier Restrepo, 78.7. Running back Damian Martinez, 78.5. Mark Fletcher Jr., 76.2. Francisco Malangoa, 75.5. CJ Clark, 72.6. And also, like Syracuse, the highest grade player was a quarterback in Cam Ward, 91.6 grade. Dalton, for you, what told the story in this shootout?
Okay, so this is about Miami's defense in the grand scheme of things here. They gave up all 42 of those points in the final 41 minutes of this game. And when you're looking at, I was a week or two ago, I was breaking down all of the playoff contenders, okay, and all their offensive and defensive metrics. And the one thing that kept popping up among the 16 to 18 teams I was looking at was Miami had the worst defense out of all of them. It just was in several metrics, especially in a lot of pass defense metrics, and all came unglued in this game. 49.8 coverage grade as a team in this game, their worst of the season. Max, since week 4, 109th in the country in coverage grade. It's just not. They allowed 11 explosive passes in this game. This was going to be the thing for Miami that was going to sink them, was their defense. And look, their pass rush, some guys were banged up. They got a big rotation of them. It had been kind of slowly deteriorating. The run defense was really good. You couldn't really run on them, but their pass defense slowly fell apart. We saw them give up a boatload of points in their ACC games, right? The Cal game, the Virginia Tech game, the Louisville game, this game. I mean, they just couldn't make stops through the air when it mattered most. And I know a lot of the controversy is about whether they should have gone for the touchdown instead of the field goal on their last drive to tie the game yesterday. Their defense, I don't think it would have mattered. I don't think they were getting to stop anything. Anyway, I think Kyle McCord would have marched down the field and got a game-winning field goal and won anyway, because that's just where this secondary was at. Let me throw this to you. In ACC play, right, I'm going to take all the ACC offenses against all the ACC defenses. They allowed the 4th most points. They allowed the 2nd highest percentage of touchdowns. All right, 33% of opponents' drives in ACC play went for touchdowns. That was better than only Stanford. Second most, they allowed the 2nd most yards after catch per attempt in the ACC, in ACC play. 13th among the 17 in coverage grade, 11th in pass rush grade. At the end of the day, this was not the pass defense that we thought it would be. I thought the secondary might struggle considering some of the pieces they lost on the back end last year, but the pass rush didn't help a whole lot either in recent weeks, and it all just completely fell apart. You cannot ask. And Cam Ward did it anyway. Graded, a 91 in this game?
Yeah.
Cam Ward did everything he possibly could have to carry this team to the playoff, and now, honestly, I don't think they're making it.
No, they're not.
And it's because of their defense. They don't have the resume to make it. They don't have enough big wins on this schedule. I get it. They got the big in-state win over Florida. We were at the game when they went to Louisville and won, but there's not enough big wins here to make up for a loss to Georgia Tech and a loss to Syracuse. And I know Syracuse is 9-3, and they're pretty darn good, but this was about Miami's defense being their undoing. And now I really believe they're going to miss the playoff because of it.
And I think so too. And they can't even get an automatic qualifier because now with this loss, Clemson, even though they lost as well, we'll talk about that game later, Clemson's in the ACC title game now against SMU. Miami's out. So Miami cannot play another game until the playoff is announced, and I don't think they're getting in now. I'm with you. I do not think they're getting in.
I think they are the team, and there's been a lot of talk about cross resumes in the SEC and all that. I think they are the team that does, even at 10-2, does not have the resume of one of those other SEC teams.
Yeah, Alabama, South Carolina.
Either or.
Dude, and listen, they're not going to be up there. BYU even. BYU at 10-2 is a better resume than Miami at 10-2.
The idea of Miami being ranked that high and what the committee chair Ward Manuel even said was the offensive prowess. Well, that's great, but teams got to play defense too. They had offensive prowess in this game, but if you lose the game, you lose the game. It's about your whole football team, and you're seeing it. More balanced football teams are making the playoff, and Miami was not a balanced team.
Yeah, my stat that tells the story is basically the same thing. Both quarterbacks had a 90-plus passing grade in this shootout. Kyle McCord, 90.9 passing grade, 27 for 40 for 380 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 picks, average over 10 yards per attempt, 4 big-time throws, 2 turnover-worthy plays. And don't we said it, the pass rush for Miami hasn't been as good lately. His average time to throw was 2.17 seconds. He was getting rid of that football at lightning speed. So the Syracuse O-line, which has been all year, it didn't matter. You get rid of the football that quickly, it doesn't matter how bad your O-line is, honestly. So Kyle McCord, great job. And also Cam Ward, great job as well. Let's give him his flowers. 91.7 passing grade, 25 for 36 for 349 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, almost 10 yards per attempt as well. 2 big-time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays. These two entered this game as the 2 leading passers in college football in terms of yardage. And it looked like it out there. They were just going throw for throw. It was an awesome, awesome game to watch between these two. Kyle McCord came out on top because the Miami defense just could not make plays. Well, Syracuse's defense did make some plays, right? The Xavier triple fumble that was returned for a touchdown, but it was an awesome shootout between these two quarterbacks. I'm kind of had a feeling going into it, this would be a shootout because Syracuse's secondary, not that great. Miami's secondary, not that great. And two great quarterbacks and two great receiving cores going head-to-head. We knew it would be a shootout, and it was a shootout.
Did I hear something about the 21-point comeback being the biggest in school history?
Probably. Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing, too, is they were down 21-0 in this game. Miami
that's right.
Miami,
it looked over
20
quick.
minutes in, Miami was in complete control of the game, and McCord brought him back. And he's my most impressive. He has to be. I mean, you mentioned all the numbers in this game, in the clutch, bringing him back against one of the top teams in the country. And I just want to go for the season. Look, leads the nation in pass attempts. They leaned on him more than any other quarterback in the country. Most passing yards, most big-time throws, tied for fourth in touchdowns, sixth in overall with a 90.4 overall grade.
Hell yeah.
Think about that. By the PFF grading, he was the sixth best quarterback in the country this year. You know, I thought about this last night, and I think there's going to be a lot of debate. Look, Travis Hunter, Ashton Jeanty, Cam Ward are going to be three of the seats at the Heisman ceremony, right? Is it possible? It probably not because it's not, but should it be Kyle McCord as the fourth one?
He's up there, but like they're going to give it to Dylan Gabriel.
I think he's at least in the top six of the Heisman.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, between Gabriel and I think Shedeur Sanders and then Kyle McCord.
He should get 10. He should get top 10 votes for sure. Yeah.
Syracuse won 9 games.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we're at. And I mean, imagine what we might be saying had they beaten Stanford, right? I mean, that's a killer loss from earlier in the year. Then they'd be 10-2. The Pitt game, maybe they just weren't winning that game. But if you take out that Pitt game, Kyle McCord's just been spectacular all year. And I mean, I almost thought about him. Like, you look at the numbers, you look at him leading in yards, you look at him fourth in touchdowns, most big-time throws. I would honestly have him probably fifth or sixth in my Heisman.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair.
Heisman list right now.
That's totally fair.
I mean, it's just spectacular numbers, and to finish it with a win like this and a comeback like this is incredible.
Yeah, I unfortunately don't think he will be in New York for the Heisman ceremony, but he should be a top 10 vote getter in terms of Heisman, I think.
Oh, easily.
Yeah, I think he should be. So, yeah, I'm with you there. He's been outstanding. My most impressive, Dalton, is Fran Brown. And I'll admit, firsthand, as a Syracuse alum, when they hired Fran Brown, I was like, I don't know about that. I don't know if I like that much. Obviously, Georgia's defensive back coach, yes, he's an ace recruiter, and that really was what he was hired for. But I was like, he's never really been he's like a co-defensive coordinator at Temple for like 1 year or 2 years. He's never really been a real full-time coordinator, never been a head coach before either. It's a big jump from going from a position coach, even at Georgia, but a position coach to a head coach at the Power 4 level at Syracuse. I was wrong. I was dead wrong about Fran Brown, man. 9-3 record for Syracuse this year. Their best since 2017, my freshman year at Syracuse, the last time they had a record this good. Their first top 10 win since 2017, my freshman year, when I stormed the field against Clemson that year. And my family was there with me as well. Dude, he fixed the biggest issue with Syracuse football under Dino Babers: talent acquisition. Dino Babers and the coaching staff actually did a decent job at developing talent there. The problem was they didn't get talent there at all. They were horrible in recruiting under Dino Babers. Last year, though, 37th best recruiting class in the country. This year, right now, 44th in America. Their last class, Dawn, that was as high as 37th or even 44th this year was back in 2007 when they were 43rd in America. So I could not even find the last time they were top 40 before that either. I don't think it's ever happened, honestly, where the top 40. So top 40 last year, top 45 this year. And not only that, recruiting-wise, high school, great. Number 9 in the transfer portal last year, according to On3. They brought in Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord, listen, he's not going to Dino Babers. Dino Babers is the head coach there. Kyle McCord's like, yeah, I'm not going there. Fran Brown goes there. He's like, no, I might go there. Former 5-star quarterback, former Ohio State starting quarterback Kyle McCord goes to Syracuse and leads the nation in passing yards. That is what's possible under a head coach like Fran Brown who can get talent in the freaking building. Dino Babers and past Syracuse coaches could not get talent into the building because I'll tell you firsthand, as someone who lived in Syracuse for 4 years, it's not very fun to live at. It's a cold city. It's a depressing city. It's gray. The sun goes down in August. It doesn't come back up until May. It's not a very fun city to live in, and yet Fran Brown is convincing these high-profile names to not only come there out of high school, but to transfer there from big-time programs as well. I was dead freaking wrong on Fran Brown, man. I listened to Stanford loss. I was like, oh, maybe this won't work out. He just beat freaking Miami. He beat Miami, a top 10 team. Not only that, he killed the Hurricanes' playoff hopes as well. Hand up, I was dead wrong on Fran Brown. I am all in on the Fran Brown era at Syracuse right now.
No, I'm with you. I think the big question going into next year is how do they replace McCord? But
yeah, they go in the portal again.
To get McCord in fresh and have him lead the nation in passing and get a win like this is incredible. So, no, props to Fran Brown and Syracuse, and we'll see if they get their 10th win in a bowl game.
That's right. They were 10-3 in 2017 as well, so if they can win their bowl game, they'll also finish at 10-3. So, yeah, hell of a win for Fran Brown and hell of a season for Fran Brown. He could shower as well, big time, because losers don't get showered, as his saying. So winners get washed. There's actually a T-shirt going around Syracuse. I actually might have to buy it. Winners get washed, and Fran Brown.
Don't bring that approach.
I'm not going to do that. But Fran Brown getting washed after that. And dude, like I said, these first two games, big weekend for me because Penn State's going to the Big Ten title game. Syracuse beat a top 10 team in Miami. So hell of a weekend right there. But next game we're talking about is a Friday night. Actually, no, let's go to the Texas A&M game first. As my bag is on the desk right there. Texas against Texas A&M, an amazing game that we saw. Actually, not that amazing. Really, Texas took care of business there. But still, Texas going to the SEC title game after beating Texas A&M to play Georgia next week in the SEC title game. Let's go over the grades, starting off with the Texas Longhorns. Leona Lafau with a 92.1 grade. Michael Taffy, the safety, 87.7. Another safety in Andrew Mkuba, 84.1. Defensive tackle Vernon Broughton with his 83 grade. Hayden Connor, the guard, 80.4. And Quinn Ewers with a 67.3 grade. Let's go over to Texas A&M with their highest graded players, starting off with edge defender Cassius Howell, 81.7. Linebacker Torian York, 78.5. Another edge defender, Shamar Stewart, 73.4. Defensive tackle Albert Regis with a 70.6 grade. Dalton Brooks, the safety, 70.5. And Marcel Reed, the quarterback, 58.6 against Texas. Dalton, for you, the stat that told the story in this Texas victory.
There was a whole lot of defense on that board, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Now, the biggest thing I was worried about in this game is whether or not Texas A&M would be able to run the football, right? I mean, I think they'd been struggling to do it in the last two games that they had lost. It'd been kind of a problem. But you've got a situation where Texas A&M on 24 design carries only ran for 60 yards. And that's just not going to get it done. They can't ask Marcel Reed to carry them this season through all these difficulties, right? The South Carolina game, falling behind early in the Auburn game against this Texas defense. It's just not going to work. It's not going to work when they can't run the football. They're designed to run the ball and play defense, and their defense was really good in this game. They only gave up 17 points. They held Texas run game, especially in the second half, I thought. They didn't let Texas run away with it, even when it was 17-0 at halftime. They pitched a shutout and scored 7 points on defense in the second half. Their defense was good enough to win this game. Their offense obviously wasn't. One forced missed tackle as a team on the ground. That was Marcel Reed. One explosive run. That was Marcel Reed. In fact, nobody other than Marcel Reed had a run longer than 5 yards. No, but not running backs, receivers on jet sweep, any of that. That was the longest run that a non-Marcel Reed player had, was 5 yards. They just never – Texas dominated the trenches. They never let them get it going on the ground, and we know A&M really wants to win on the ground. Didn't happen. 60 designed rushing yards, 2.5 per carry.
Jeez, man.
Can't have it.
Yeah, you can't. And I guess Texas defense, which my set the whole story, Texas 90.4 defensive grade in this victory. That 90.3 run defensive grade that you just talked about, and a 90 coverage grade as well for Texas. Only 4.3 yards per play allowed, negative .335 EPA per play. Right now, Dalton, on the season, they have a 94.5 team defense grade. That's the best in college football right now. If this team is going to win the SEC, and if this team is going to win the national championship, it'll be because of this defense. When a lot of people thought going into the year, because of Quinn Ewers and the amazing O-line and the receivers, and the defense, even our preview of Texas, we said, defense is like, we'll see, because they lost some key pieces there. No, this is the best defense college football looks like right now. They are dominating it right now in college football. And Dawn, one guy we've not talked about enough, Pete Kwiatkowski, the defensive coordinator for Texas, because Steve Sarkisian obviously is an offensive guy. He has done a masterful job this year. When a lot of people thought the Texas defense going into it could be their kryptonite, it's been the best in the nation, and then what's been their biggest driving force to the SEC title game and to maybe the number 2 ranking in college football right now, I think he deserves serious Bros Award consideration right now. He has done an amazing job with this defense.
I see 4 defenses in college football that are great at all 3 levels. Okay, Texas, Ohio State, they didn't lose because of their defense.
No.
South Carolina, and Notre Dame. Those are the 4 defenses I see that are spectacular at all 3 levels of their defense. I think they're the 4 best defenses in college football. I think Penn State's right along there with it. Sometimes I have a little question about their secondary, especially obviously they haven't played with Kevin Winston all year, so but Penn State's really dangerous too. But those are the 4 that I feel confident are spectacular at all 3 levels. Texas may have the best defense in college football. It may carry them to a national title. I think they are capable of carrying this team as long as the offense doesn't make too many mistakes. I think this defense could carry them all the way.
Absolutely. So, Dawn, most impressive part of this Texas victory?
Okay, so a couple of times in the past this season, I've gone with Big 95, Alfred Collins, and he's had such a great year, but I'm going with the guy right next to him. It's got to be number 45, Vernon Broughton on the inside. This was his best game of the year, I thought. 83 overall grade, 5 pressures, 2 sacks, forced a fumble. I mean, and this was a big question, was Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy were the 2 best players in their entire team last year. Both of them get drafted, and now you've got Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton on the inside now, and we're getting to a point where there's not really a significant drop-off, and you're talking about 2 guys that went in the top 50 of the draft. They're dominating teams in the trenches. The transfer guys they got in the secondary have dominated. Andrew Makuba has been amazing. They're great at linebacker with Anthony Hill, right? It's safety with Michael Tapp. I mean, they're just loaded on defense. If you're going to beat this team, you're going to get yourself in a defensive battle, and you're probably going to have to beat them 24-20 because you're not scoring much more than that.
No, absolutely. He was outstanding yesterday. Let's go with an offensive player. It wasn't really an offensive game, but I'll go with an offensive player here. Contravion Wisner against Texas A&M had 186 rushing yards, 145 yards after contact. He broke 9 tackles as well, 4.4 yards after contact against a very strong run defense, and on 33 carries as well. So he had a lot of carries, and he still was breaking a lot of tackles, and he never really slowed down, even as the game wore on, honestly. Also 2 catches for 21 yards. We talked about before with C.J. Baxter, when he got hurt preseason and he's out for the entire year, the starting running back. We're like, oh boy, this Texas run game could be a problem. And at times it has been this year. But with Wisner playing as well as he did yesterday, and with Quinn Ewers continuing to struggle, this is a problem now. The Quinn Ewers thing is become a really big problem for Texas. They can head into the SEC title game and the college football playoff as well. But if you have that defense and you got a run game you can rely on with Wisner, you can overcome, not great quarterback play, which is what Quinn Ewers has provided for the last several weeks of the entire season. But Contravion Wisner was great, and I think that he was a big part of why Texas was able to win this game.
That'll be the question. And some people keep side-eyeing and looking towards Arch Manning, and he got a couple snaps running the ball in this game, but that's going to be the big question, especially in their next game, because that was arguably the worst game of his career was against Georgia earlier this year, and now he's got to play him again. I
know. Dude, it's crazy to think that Texas might have to bench their starting quarterback in order to win a national title, but I will say there were some really nice throws he made against Texas A&M yesterday.
He did. I think
it wasn't horrible.
I think it's a problem on the outside too. Honestly, Gunnar Helm is their best receiving threat, and I don't think that was supposed to be the case when they have Isaiah Bond and Matthew Golden and Silas Bolden and all the guys they have at receiver. That was not supposed to be the design of this, and Gunnar Helm has been by far their best receiving weapon this year. They need to figure it out on the outside, and Ewers, look, there's even a couple plays yesterday that made you a little nervous. He got through it.
2 turnovers in the red zone.
I mean, yeah, and I think we have to mention that part is Texas did only score 17 points in this game. So it's still going to be a concern, especially going into next week when Georgia's defense put them in a blender the first time, and right now I don't know that they've given us a whole lot of reason to believe offensively that they won't do it again. We could see, honestly, on both sides, we could see a very low-scoring game.
I think so. I think it could be a really low-scoring game. So that's going to be a really fun game next week with Texas going on to play Georgia in the SEC title game. Texas A&M officially dead. No longer has any shot at making the college football playoff with this 4th loss of the season. And now Texas and Georgia, I would say both of them are in the college football playoff. But it wasn't easy for Georgia this past week, Dalton. They beat Georgia Tech on Friday night 44-42 in 8 overtimes. 8 overtimes, the second most overtimes in college football history, trailing only Penn State against Illinois. I forgot what year exactly it was, but Penn State and Illinois went to 9 overtimes one year. It was a hideous football game. This was a very fun football game, though, as well, with Georgia beating Georgia Tech at the very, very end of it. Let's go into the grades, starting off with the victorious Georgia Bulldogs in this one, starting off with C.J. Allen, their linebacker, 87.6 grade. Tight end Ben Urasek with a 77.1. K.J. Bolden, 69.6. Defensive tackle Nazir Stackhouse, 69.2. Another D tackle Warren Brinson, 68.9. And Carson Beck with a 75.3 grade. All right, let's go over to Georgia Tech with their highest graded players in this loss. Starting off with linebacker Kyle Effort, 79.5 grade, Ethan McKinney, the offensive tackle, with a 76.6. Makia Scott, 72.6. Eric Singleton Jr., 68.5, the wide receiver. Amari Harvey, the corner, 68.1. And Haynes King, the quarterback, 77.7 grade. Dawn, for you, the stat that told the story in this thrilling Black Friday game.
Okay, before we got all the twists and turns and overtimes and all of that, we have seen with Georgia Tech multiple times this year in multiple upsets that if you let them get in their wheelhouse and you let the run game get going, they can beat anybody. That's just the way their offense is. They control the football. They play the game at their pace. They dictate the pace of the game. My stat is that they held the ball in regulation for 37 minutes and 11 seconds. And that's if you don't allow an opposing team's offense on the field, they can't score. We got to remember, before all the overtimes, they had a 14-point lead with, about 6 minutes to go or so, and Carson Beck had to bring Georgia back. This was a game where in regulation, I should say, that was 90% dominated by Georgia Tech. 252 rushing yards, 5.6 per carry, 4 different players with an explosive run. Haynes King just played his absolute heart out. The offensive line was great. Jackson Hawes was great at tight end. Jamal Haynes was playing through pain. I mean, you had plays from Eric Singleton on the outside. Georgia Tech got in their wheelhouse, absolutely, and they just couldn't hold the lead in regulation when they were up by 14, and that's the part I think more than the overtimes that's going to sting the most from this is they got to play their game in Athens, up 27-13 late, running the football, controlling the clock. Everything Georgia Tech wanted to do, they went out and did it. They just didn't finish Georgia off. And that's a big thing with Georgia and Kirby Smart and Carson Beck and the pedigree is you got to finish them off if you're going to beat them. Much like Ole Miss did when they just finished them off and the game was done, they left no doubt. You have to leave no doubt that Georgia's done. Yep. And Georgia Tech, they just missed an opportunity. But for 90% of this game, this was Georgia Tech's ball game.
Yeah, it really was. And my side of the story is really the passing difference in the two halves, really a tale of two halves for these passing games. Because in the first half, Georgia, negative .294 EPA per pass. And then in the second half, .504 EPA per pass. Carson Beck, 67.4 passing grade in the first half. 80.7 passing grade in the second half. He had 5 touchdown passes in the second half and overtime with a rushing touchdown to boot as well. Georgia Tech, though, .697 EPA per pass in the first half to .276 EPA per pass, almost a third of that in the second half. Haynes King, 87.4 passing grade in the first half, 64.4 passing grade in the second half. Georgia Tech went to the locker room up 17-0. Honestly, it could have been worse than 17-0. They were outscored 44-25 in the second half and overtime. The biggest difference to me, one passing game that was ice cold, heated up in the second half, and one passing game that was red hot, really cooled down in the second half and overtime.
Yeah, no, I mean, Georgia, look, Kirby Smart's always going to make the adjustments, and he was even doing it in every single of the 2-point overtimes, calling a timeout before pretty much every play, right? And Kirby's the mastermind. And again, Georgia knows how to keep themselves in a game, and that's what an experienced team with the pedigree like them, can do. And I think in the playoff, that's a big factor. I think you have other teams in the playoff who haven't been through those sorts of things, and with Georgia playing in SEC championships before, national title games before. They've been in these situations. That experience in getting them through difficult situations, that plays a big factor, and I think it's going to continue to play a big factor as we get them into the playoff. Georgia could still win a national title. but they're going to have to do it with a little more grit and guile this year instead of, in past years where they were just the most talented team in college football.
Definitely. What was the most impressive part to you in this Georgia victory?
I just want to give credit to both quarterbacks, honestly. Yeah. Haynes King played his heart out. 23 carries for 111 yards and 3 touchdowns, 303 passing yards and 2 big-time throws. I mean, just a spectacular game from him. He played, honestly, outside of the fumble that Dan Jackson made the great play on.
That might have been targeting, by the way, too. Dude, that was pretty close.
There'll be arguments about it, but I mean, it's tougher. It's tougher between the tackles.
Yeah, that's true. That is true
too. And then Carson Beck, you mentioned the big second half, but to finish with 294 yards and 5 touchdowns after they got shut out in the first half. I mean, these two quarterbacks duked it out, and they did it in their own way. Beck from the pocket, King with the dual threat stuff. I mean, Georgia Tech. Are they 6-6 or 7-5 this year? I don't remember. But either way, Georgia Tech, with a brutal schedule this season, what a fun year they had.
7-5.
I think Brent Key needs to be given a lot of credit even just for getting them there, because
he's turned that program around.
They played Florida State in Ireland when everyone thought they were going to lose. Now it looks different because of what Florida State is, but at the time they were 14-point dogs in that game, right?
Florida State was top 10 in the country.
Right. Notre Dame, they played Louisville, they played Miami and won, they played Georgia and almost won. I mean, a brutal schedule for Georgia Tech. I just have to love the way that Brent Key's got that program going. One of these years when they don't have a schedule like that, they're going to contend for an ACC title. I believe that. I love what they're doing. The improvement this year on defense, I know it didn't show in the second half of this game, but their defense was awful front to back last year. Haynes King and the development and just the run game and everything they want to do, they know their identity, and I think that's a big part of being a good football team. Georgia Tech, it's 7-5. I know it doesn't seem great on paper. I think they had an excellent season.
I mean, considering where this program was like a couple years ago, though, like 7-5, yeah, we'll take that. Like they were consistently missing bowl games.
With this schedule, this is the ACC version of Florida. With this schedule that, how we were talking about Florida going 7-5, and that was a great year of progress for them. I think it's the same with Georgia Tech. I think very soon they're going to be ACC contenders.
So from before Brent Key was hired, 2019 under Jeff Collins, when Jeff Collins was hired, 3-9, 3-7, 3-9. Then he went 1-3. Brent Key took over and went 4-4 in his first year as the interim coach. So 5-7 overall. And then 2 years under Brent Key, they're 7-6 and now 7-5 right now.
There's going to be a year where they get more talented and they have an easier schedule. They're going to contend.
So 4 straight years of not making a bowl game, and now 2 straight years of making a bowl game under Brent Key. Yeah. He's done an amazing job of turning around that program, honestly. So yeah, great, big shout out to him. And Haynes King, you're right, he was battling out there. I mean, you saw a couple times during the two-point conversion attempts, he was running the ball and he could barely get up. Like he was clearly hurting out there, but he gave it all and almost pulled off a major victory over Georgia. My most impressive part, though, the Georgia pass blocking. This has been the kind of theme for them all year. The Georgia offensive line was outstanding at pass blocking, as it's been all year. 85.9 pass blocking grade as a team. 2 sacks allowed, 6 pressures allowed on 49 snaps as well. Jared Wilson, the center, completely clean sheet. No pressures allowed, no sacks allowed, and wasn't even beaten once either. So completely clean sheet. Tate Ratledge, Xavier Truss, Dylan Fairchild, only 1 pressure allowed each. Monroe Freeling, the other tackle, 2 pressures allowed in this game. For a quarterback like Carson Beck that relies so much on clean pockets, he is not good under pressure at all. He needs this kind of offensive line. If this offensive line was not there, and they had an average offensive line or below average offensive line or one like Ohio State, they would not be in the playoff right now. They wouldn't be close to being a college football playoff team. This offensive line, more so than anything else in this offense, maybe more so than anything on this team, is the biggest reason why they're still alive right now. Because if not, with Carson Beck playing the way he does under pressure, they're screwed. They would have lost multiple games without this offensive line, right? So this offensive line for Georgia has arguably been the best part of the entire team. And again, against Georgia Tech, it was outstanding.
Those interior 3 you mentioned of Ratledge, Wilson, and Fairchild, that might be the best interior offensive line in college football.
I agree.
It's just spectacular, and they're so clean on the inside. You mentioned a pocket quarterback like Beck. Very often it's interior pressure that bothers them the most, but they don't have to worry about that with this team. They just need to execute better with Beck and with the receivers and just getting the passing game rolling on the outside, but it helps when you're protected, right? Like you mentioned, the opposite of the Ohio State game where it's, okay, with Georgia, at least we're protected. At least we can execute. We have an opportunity to execute.
And they don't have great weapons either, so it's
they don't. Yeah. They need to execute at a high level on the outside because they're not as talented out there as they have been in past years, or certainly since last year with Bowers and McConkey. That's been the story, is them overcoming a lesser talent level on the outside, and Carson Beck overcoming that. But when you're protected and you give quarterbacks a mostly clean pocket, you have a chance of success.
Yeah,
sure.
Georgia right now tied for 12th in America in pass blocking grade this year. I mean, it has been dominant for Georgia all year in terms of pass blocking. Also a pretty good run blocking unit as well. They're 35th in run blocking grade this year as well. So Georgia's offensive line, outstanding all year, and really is the reason why they're still alive right now. Because if not, with Beck struggling to pressure, with the receiving core not being that great, this offense will be lost at the end of the offensive line. How about Jared Wilson, though, Dalton, real quick? They lost Cedric Van Pran, legendary center at Georgia, and everyone thought, oh boy, what's going to look like at center after this? Jared Wilson has been one of the best centers in college football this year. It's insane what he's been doing. So I want to shout him out because he's been unreal for them this year. When a lot of people thought after losing SVP, they're like, oh boy, it could be a really tough position for Georgia this year, and he has come in there and be an outstanding center for them.
That's a great call. And you need that guy both to be productive and be a leader, and he's done that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Georgia staying alive. They still would have been have a chance to make the playoff if they lost Georgia Tech, because obviously all they got to do is win the SEC. But now Georgia and Texas, I would say, right, they clinched. Right now, Georgia can afford to lose to Texas next week and still make the college football playoff.
I think they're both locks. Yeah, I agree with that.
Before, if they lost to Georgia Tech, then it'd be like you have to beat Texas in order to make the playoff, probably. But not anymore. I think Georgia is safely in the college football playoff now. All right, Dalton, another two teams we're talking about here. Another ACC versus SEC game that we're talking about here is South Carolina taking down Clemson 17-14. Number 15 South Carolina beating number 12 Clemson. Let's go over the highest graded players from what was a very, very fun game. Starting off with the Gamecocks and TJ Sanders, their defensive tackle, 74.4 grade. Alex Huntley, another D tackle, 74.1. Nick Manwari, the safety, 72.4. O'Donnell Fortune, 72.1. Tonka Hemingway, 70.7, as it's been almost all year for South Carolina. Their five highest graded non-quarterbacks all came from the defensive side of the football, but Lenora Sellers, we'll talk about in a little bit, 73 grade in the victory for the Gamecocks. Go over to Clemson with their highest graded players in their loss. Starting off with edge defender TJ Parker, 78 grade. Linebacker Sammy Brown, 74 grade. Safety RJ Micken, 70.7. Offensive tackle Blake Miller, 69.8. Wide receiver Antonio Williams, 64.7. And Kay Klubnik rounding it out at quarterback with a 73.6 grade. Dawn, for you, the stat that told the story in what was a really, really fun game between these two teams.
Well, I know all our Gamecock fans out there want to hear me talk about Lenora Sellers, and that's what we're going to do. Okay, here's the thing. Coming into this game, Sellers was grading 10 points higher against the blitz than against a standard rush, than against a four-man rush, right? So, naturally, Clemson decided to come in and blitz him half the time. On half of his dropbacks, they blitzed him, which is a very, very high rate. Lenora Sellers against the blitz, passing 6 for 11, 84 yards, a big-time throw, 71.2 passing grade. 3 scrambles among those dropbacks. 90 yards and a touchdown and a 90.8 rushing grade. The touchdown was his first one, actually. That was South Carolina's first touchdown in the second quarter. The second one came against a four-man rush, and there was a spy, and he just outran the spy because as a runner, he's a freak of nature. You're going to go more into that. But that was the part, and I think for me, the biggest improvement from Lenora Sellers lately, and for as much as I love Shane Beamer vouching for his guy, he is not the best player in the country yet, and he's not the Heisman Trophy favorite. That's not where we're at with Lenora Sellers, but he's definitely gotten better the second half of the season. He was the shakiest part of this team through the first 5 or 6 games, and now he's become a pretty stable force and a guy who I think is making better decisions under pressure and against the blitz when teams are trying to speed him up. I think he's done a good job of just making decisions that don't lose you ball games. I think he still has to work on a lot of things from the pocket, the ball security. He's got 3 turnover-worthy plays in this game, but as a runner, especially against the blitz, and even there was a few good throws where he got rid of the ball on time, that was the biggest thing for me. And I was a little surprised that Clemson, as the game went on, they kept challenging him, and I know there was times, and South Carolina's pass protection isn't great. They were getting free rushers at him. But he's, 6'5" and 240 and can really run. You're not going to tackle him with a slot corner, and that's what happened in this game. But Sellers against the blitz, when he'd already been better against the blitz in a standard rush, and Clemson blitzing him on half of his dropbacks. I'm not really getting the logic there, but he found a way to beat it. And in an ugly game where they had to pull it out at the end, he was the biggest reason.
And biggest reason for that, Dawn, as a rusher, oh my God. What he did against Clemson as a rusher was historic stuff, literally. Dalton, he forced 18 missed tackles. 18 as a quarterback. The only player in the nation with more in a game this year was Ashton Ginty when he broke 20 tackles against San Diego State earlier this season. So only Ashton Ginty, who a lot of people think should win the Heisman Trophy, had more broken tackles in a game than Norris Sellers. And for a quarterback, we've never seen this before. We have never seen in the PFF college era a quarterback break 18 tackles in a game, and we've been doing this since 2014. So we've seen guys like Lamar Jackson. We've seen guys like Marcus Mariota, like Kyler Murray, elite rushing threats at the quarterback position. None of them done this before. Against Clemson as well. None of them have broke 18 tackles in a game. He had 171 rushing yards, 176 yards after contact. If you're wondering how on earth, I've gotten DMs from South Carolina fans saying, hey, I think you got your number wrong because he has more yards after contact than he does rushing yards. I'm like, nope, didn't get it wrong. He got hit in the backfield so much, and he broke out of it and made a magical play out of it. Dude, what he did was literally nothing else but magical. He was magical against South Carolina. I could not believe some of the runs he was pulling off out there. They had him dead to rights multiple times in that game. For sacks, he broke out of it, juked a few guys out, and made a 25-yard gain. He was unfreaking believable. He averaged almost 12 yards after contact per carry. 12 yards after contact per carry for a quarterback, Dalton. I could not believe what the Norris Sellers did out there. His ceiling is so high. Yes, there is still stuff to clean up as a passer, but his ceiling going into next year as a redshirt sophomore is ridiculously high, dude. And what he did as a rusher in this game with 18 broken tackles, a new quarterback record for PFF against Clemson, insane. There's nothing else to say but insane from the Norris Sellers.
No, and the most impressive for me has to be Sellers, right? And there wasn't a lot of great offensively in this game from either side, right? It was ugly. Even Clemson's 2 touchdowns were Cade Klubnik rushing touchdowns. And I think what you had is you always want to find out in your quarterback if you have a guy who can will you to a win in a tough game like this on the road, in one of the toughest road environments to play in college football. And that's what they found out. I think they found it out in this game and in the Missouri game. I think these are the 2 big games for, South Carolina looking forward to the future. Well, we can debate their college football playoff standing all day long. We'll see if the committee feels like they can jump Alabama and be maybe a team that they get the last team in and all of that. But either way, it's been a wildly successful year. And you think about they're coming into this season with a bad offensive line. Their number 1 receiver got drafted, a freshman quarterback who played like 20 snaps last year or something. South Carolina offensively really didn't have anything to start with.
And one of their best receivers transferred to Ole Miss as well.
Yeah, Juice Wells went to Ole Miss. I mean, their top 2 receivers were gone, and they had no offensive line, and they're basically, we were like, okay, they have Sellers and they have Rocket Sanders, and I don't even know where this is going. But where it's going is that LaNorris Sellers' development, and there's still a ways to go. He's not the best quarterback in the SEC yet. His development is going to be one of the biggest stories in the conference next year. Yeah. Because a guy who can do that, I think his skill set is very similar to Jalen Milroe. Yeah. Right now, I think it is. I think he can be that type of guy of that caliber, right? And that's the difference. Is he going to be somebody more like an Avery Johnson or a Kyron Drones? Or is he going to develop a little more as a passer and be a Jalen Milroe, or even more and be better than that and be a Heisman candidate, right? I think they have a guy they feel like they can do that with, and they have a defense with a boatload of talent and still some coming back. And this, again, this is one of the best defenses in college football. Let's not forget that. They held Clemson to 14 points in this game, and the only thing that Clemson had was Klubnik running the ball, right? Yeah. Sellers is going to be a big story. Is he all the way there yet? No, but the improvement in the second half is a big deal, especially as a passer, and I think under pressure in his decision-making.
Yeah. Even with Klubnik running the ball, my most impressive part is the South Carolina run D. I said in the preview, for Clemson to win this game offensively, they had to attack South Carolina's run D, which has been good, not great, whereas the coverage unit has been great. The pass rush has been great. Well, really, they tried, and South Carolina's run D stood tall in this one. 88.3 run defense grade as a team, negative .216 EPA per run. On 29 run defense snaps, they had 15 stops. So over half of the run defense snaps for South Carolina was a win for South Carolina. TJ Sanders, we mentioned before, is a highest grade player. He had 4 run defense stops in this game. And what's crazy was the pass rush for South Carolina wasn't really there. They had a 60.6 pass rushing grade as a team. That's the second lowest for them all year, trailing only only ahead of the Alabama game where they lost that one. Their run defense, though, really did step up in this one. So the South Carolina run D, where I thought Clemson might be able to get a little bit of an advantage at, where there was no advantage to be had because the South Carolina run D really stood tall and dominated this game.
No, I agree with you. And what kept happening was they kept putting Clemson behind the chains, right? And you look at the design carries in this game, 29 design carries for 115 yards. That's good enough.
Yeah.
They'll take that all day long. So I think you're looking at a South Carolina team now that it's at least put itself in the conversation. I think if SMU beats Clemson in the ACC title, the way I was racking it up, I think the last spot goes to either Alabama or South Carolina.
Yeah.
And then it's a debate of resume and what have you done for me lately and recency bias versus Alabama did beat them head-to-head, even though it was by only 2 points and it went down to the wire.
Alabama beat Georgia, too.
I think, and they did beat Georgia, but the losses matter, too. And you look at South Carolina losing to LSU by a field goal with their backup quarterback, Alabama by 2, and they had a blowout loss to Ole Miss. Ole Miss just beat them. And Alabama lost to, Vandy and Oklahoma badly, and the third one was Tennessee, and they lost to Tennessee as well. So the entire resume would say, well, it's maybe a coin flip.
Yeah,
and
it is
South Carolina with the head-to-head might need it to be a little more than a coin flip, though. I mean, I think the committee would lean in on Alabama, but South Carolina's got a really good case if the last spot came down to those two teams.
Would you give it to South Carolina? My answer's coming up soon, by the way, because I do have an answer for that. But
it's so hard. I think I would.
Okay.
Because of Alabama's losses, losing to a 6-6 Vandy and losing the Oklahoma loss to me
is horrible.
When you consider South Carolina dominated Vandy, South Carolina dominated Oklahoma.
Yeah.
They have the A&M win. They have the Clemson win now. I know the Georgia win's the big one. But I think South Carolina's resume is better than a lot of people think, and their losses, when you look into it, other than the Ole Miss loss, and by the way, I know that head-to-head is a thing, South Carolina should absolutely be ahead of Ole Miss.
Yeah.
After this win. Absolutely, they should be ahead of Ole Miss. For me, the Alabama one is the question. Because Alabama, even when they played South Carolina, they didn't look great in that game.
No, they won by 2.
They won by 2 points, and South Carolina had the ball with a chance to win. I think it was in Tuscaloosa, too.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If Bama had beaten them by like 14, I'd be like, okay, we're done here. But I think South Carolina's resume is kind of underrated, and I don't think it should be just some non-consideration of that.
No, it's definitely consideration. But, yeah, we'll see my answer at the end of the show. Let's go over to the next game of the dawn with number 5 Notre Dame beating USC 49-35, and Notre Dame officially clinching a first-round game in her first-round home game in the college football playoff with this 14-point victory over USC because they do not play in conference title weekend next week, obviously. Let's go over the 5 highest-grade players, starting off with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, starting off with Emil Wagner, the offensive tackle, 90.1 grade for the tackle. Jeremiah Love, 82 grade. Jack Kaiser, 81.2. Cornerback Leonard Moore, 76.5. Junior Tui Malaka with a 74.4 grade. And the edge defender, and then Riley Leonard with a 85.7 mark against USC. Let's go to USC with their 5 highest grade players, starting off with Makai Lemon, 90 grade in this one. Nate Clifton, 75.9. Zachariah Branch, wide receiver, 72.6. Another receiver, Deuce Robinson, 72.4. Achille Arnold, safety, 72.3, and Jaden Mayava with a 91.9 grade in the loss for USC. Dalton, for you, the most sad story really in the Notre Dame 14-point victory over USC.
Well, we know what Notre Dame's identity is. It's to play great defense, and their defense in this game wasn't great until they really needed to be at the end and to run the living hell out of the football. And they ran for 7.4 yards per carry in this game. Somehow that's only their third best of the season, as is their 81.7 rushing grade in this game. 145 yards after contact. They've run for 200-plus yards in 5 straight games.
Jeez.
This is what they do, is they line up and maul people. Max, they're one of 2 teams, along with Army, in the top 10 of both rushing grade and run blocking grade. If you're going to play Notre Dame, you have to find some way to slow down Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, and Riley Leonard with his feet. And Leonard made a few nice throws yesterday also, but it's the run game. It is just one of the most efficient running games in the country. You mentioned it in our preview with USC and the run defense being kind of below average, and this is a bad matchup for them. It certainly was a bad matchup for them. We got Jeremiah Love hurdling people. We got Riley Leonard putting his body on the line between the tackles. This is Notre Dame's identity, and it's why they're more dynamic than last year, because they have Riley Leonard as the option threat, as even a design running threat. They have a 3-headed monster in the backfield that any team in the playoffs should be worried about if they have to play Notre Dame.
Yeah, and a big reason for that, Dalton, the offensive line was really good for Notre Dame. 76.2 offensive line grade in this one. Their front 5 bullied USC up front. They had a 79.8 pass blocking grade as a unit, 1 sack, 3 pressures allowed on 28 snaps, 14% pressure rate allowed in this game. That's our 4th best all year. Only 2 other losses besides the 3 pressures allowed all game as well. 72.4 run blocking grade as a unit. They averaged 3.4 yards before contact per attempt. The second most they've had all year, trailing only the Army game last week. Yes, the running backs are great, and Jarian Price and Jeremiah Love and Riley Leonard's quarterback is a really good runner. But this offensive line is kicking ass as well, and I think that's a big part of why they're able to just out-physical teams right now, honestly. If their run game is really relying on Leonard and Price and Love, who are 3 really good players, but they didn't have a great O-line, they struggle, right? You see Ohio State, they have 3 capable players like as well in Ohio State, and Will Howard and Quinshon Judkins and Trayvon Henderson, but they're struggling right now to run the ball because the O-line can't get any movement. The Notre Dame offensive line is getting movement right now, and you combine that with 3 really good runners in Leonard, Price, and Love. That is why Notre Dame is winning games really solely off the ground game right now.
No, absolutely. And this offensive line, it's a big development because wasn't this a unit that came into the year with, 6 combined starts between them before the year, I think was the number? It's a brand new offensive line.
And you lose Joe Alt.
You lost Joe Alt. You lost Blake Fisher, right? I mean, they had to redevelop this entire thing. And my most impressive, I'm going to go with the big right tackle, Emil Wagner, because coming into this year, 52 snaps in his career last season. That's all he had, but a 90.1 grade in this game, 87.8 run blocking grade. You can get behind a guy like that. 6 positive run blocks in the grading and no negatives. I mean, this is the type of performance they need up front. We talked about it again. The playoff is going to have a lot of really good defensive fronts, and if Notre Dame's offensive line can hold up and they can run the football like this, they can beat anybody because they're another one. I know they gave up 35 points in this game, and I think it is a question about their coverage on the outside if they face a great passing game, but we know their defense is really talented, especially down the middle of it. But if they can control the pace with their running game behind this offensive line, if Wagner and guys like this up front are going to play this well, and obviously the backs and Riley Leonard are great in the run game too, it's a dangerous team. It's a really dangerous team, and I think a team that maybe we're not talking about enough in the national title picture, not just the playoff picture, because they've got a little bit of everything. If they can just make enough throws in the passing game, I think this team could go a long way.
Absolutely. I want to go with my most impressive to USC side for a second. Jaden Maiava, and I'll admit, Dalton, you, I think, and I were both not really a fan of the Miller Moss benching when he got benched. I didn't even think he was the fault with the problem with USC. But Maiava was very good yesterday against Notre Dame with a 90.6 passing grade, 360 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He had 6 big-time throws against Notre Dame yesterday. That's the most by a USC quarterback in a game since Sam Darnold when he had 7 big-time throws in the bowl game against Ohio State back in 2017. So 7 years ago was the last time a USC quarterback had at least 6 big-time throws in a game, tied for the most ever by a Lincoln Riley quarterback as well. So really impressive performance by Jaden Maiava, again, against Notre Dame, who right now, besides Texas, has the best coverage grade in college football. Second best coverage grade in college football, and he threw for 6 big-time throws against them. So, yes, I know Ben Morrison's out for the year. That's a big reason why the coverage grade is so high and now is obviously not as great anymore. But still, Jaden Maiava has really exciting potential. And I understand at the very end of the game, too, he threw the interception on the goal line. That's not good at all. But he has is a lot of potential. Still some things to clean up, but I still think he could be a really good quarterback for Lincoln Riley down the road. And he showed he can carry an offense against an elite defense yesterday. He just got let down by the USC defense, which we've seen before time and time again with Caleb Williams. Getting let down by the defense. Jaden Maiava had the same thing happen to him yesterday, but he had a really, really good performance against one of the best defenses in America.
Everything you just mentioned is going to be all the big stories with USC next year. And look, let's face it, you're right with Maiava. Before the end of the game, look, with 4 minutes left to go, he was driving down to tie the game. Yeah. They were down 35-28, and then the pick six, and then another pick six, and that's what it is. But no, I mean, he was really good. Honestly, for 3.5 quarters, a lot better than I expected him to be against this defense. But USC, they have to figure out if Maiava can consistently be that guy, and like you mentioned, if they can get their defense this year, I think was better. I think closer to average than just what we saw in 2023, which was just atrocious, honestly. But they've got a ways to go before they can compete at the top of the Big Ten, and I think that's on both sides of the ball. They really need to figure out who their foundational players are.
Yep. So Notre Dame taking down USC, and Notre Dame clinching a first-round home playoff game in the process as well. Let's go over to a couple of Big 12 games, finally figuring out who is playing in the Big 12 championship game. One of them will be Iowa State beating Kansas State 29-21. We did not find out the Big 12 until 1:45 in the morning we didn't find out who we play in the title game.
It's fun, wasn't it?
It was insane. We didn't find out the first team until 9:30 at night, and the final weekend of the regular season. It just shows how crazy this conference has been. But Iowa State will be one of those teams against, obviously, Arizona State next weekend. Let's go over the Iowa State game first, though, starting off with their highest grade players in this win over Kansas State. Safety Tayshaun James, 76.5. Linebacker Jacob Ellis, 75.4. Cornerback Jontez Williams, 71.5. Defensive tackle Dominique Orange, 67.9. Cornerback Miles Purchase, 67.2. And then Rocco Beck, the quarterback, with a 51.8 grade. Let's go over to Kansas State with their highest grade players. Linebacker Austin Romaine, 90.7 grade. Offensive tackle Easton Kilty, 73.5. Damian Ilalio with a 72.6 grade. The D tackle Marquise Siegel, the safety, 71. Jace Brown, 70.7, and Avery Johnson, 65.5. Dalton, for you, the stat that told the story in this Iowa State victory.
I think in this game, I think it's actually more about Kansas State just shooting themselves in the foot. I mean, you look at all of the mistakes they made. 2 fumbles in the first half that both led to touchdowns, and we've seen this. It's a repeated theme with K-State. What do we keep saying? They are who they are. It's Kansas State. Every game's the same, win or loss. And 2 first-half fumbles led to Iowa State touchdowns. That got them down 2 scores. 3 turnovers on downs, okay, including their final 2 drives when they did have a chance to tie it up. A 21-yard field goal was blocked. 8 penalties for 65 yards. Rocco Beck, they let him get away with 3 turnover-worthy plays. Didn't get a turnover on any of them. And Avery Johnson, safety, in the fourth quarter, he rolls the ball's at the 22-yard line, and he scrambles all the way back into his own end zone and picks up an intentional grounding. I mean, these are just all of the things you can't do if you're going to try to beat a good football team. I mean, that's just where it's at. And they still only lost by 1 score. I mean, honestly, I think Iowa State, considering all of K-State's mistakes, they're kind of fortunate to come out of this game with a win. And I don't think they played great at all. I think they did just enough, and they just played a slightly cleaner football game. But this game was about Kansas State just giving it away. And that's kind of been a theme when they've lost. In their 4 losses this season, they've turned the ball over 10 times. In their 8 wins, only 5. 5 turnovers in their 8 wins. I mean, this is a team, we know, they want to control the ball, they want to run the ball, they want to get ahead, and they want to play clean football. We've seen 4 games this year where they don't do that, and they've lost all 4 of them. This is just where it's at, and they're not good enough in the passing game to come back from 2 scores down. They're just not. It's that simple. And if they turn the ball over, Kansas State is a team with very little margin for error. And they went way beyond that in this game. They absolutely could have won this game if they had cut these mistakes even in half, and some of them just inexplicable. It's just, I think Iowa State kind of got away with one. I'm going to be honest with you a little bit, because I don't think it was a great performance from them. It was just a worse one from K-State.
Yeah, Kansas State, 53 rushing grade in this one. And listen, this is the final time we're doing a review for Kansas State and even a preview for them either. You stop the run, you stop Kansas State. We talk about it time and time again. Their worst rushing grade, Dawn, since 2017. 27 years they had rushing grade this bad. Only broke 1 tackle on 30 rushing attempts. They had a 3% broken tackle rate. It's the worst since 2018, so 6 years as well there. The offensive line did an okay job at creating holes for them, but Avery Johnson, DJ Giddens, they just could not create on their own against Iowa State. And give credit to Iowa State. They did a great job of wrapping up in this game and not allowing Kansas State ground game to kill them, because if they didn't tackle well, they would have killed them. But Iowa State did a great job of not missing any tackles at all in the run game, and really is why Kansas State lost this game. Their rushing grade, the worst in 7 years. They just could not create anything, which is kind of ironic considering Avery Johnson and DJ Giddens have been great at creating stuff all year.
Yeah, no, I mean that's just where it's at with Kansas State. They are, I think, the most predictable team in college football. We just know if they run the ball and they play their game, they're going to win. If they get out of it in any way and and Avery Johnson is forced to throw the football in drop back situations, that he's not ready to do it. And he's got to develop a lot in the offseason. And this passing game, they won't win the Big 12 until they get something out of this passing game. And I know occasionally he hits a deep shot. I get it. And he's, I'm not saying he's like the worst quarterback in the Big 12 or anything. I've already made too many mistakes with that. But it's just so one-dimensional. It is. And now you're going to lose DJ Giddens to the draft, who's, what is he, a 1,300-yard back this year, 1,400? They have to find it. If they're going to center this team around Avery Johnson, they've got to become more two-dimensional, or you're going to keep getting this Jekyll and Hyde of like, okay, we ran for 350 yards this week and it was great, and then you have a game like this where I need my quarterback to bail us out, right? Like, I mentioned with Lenora Sellers. Sometimes you want to see if your quarterback can just will you to a win. It's just, I don't think it's there consistently with Avery Johnson right now.
Yeah,
I don't. I actually have serious questions as to whether they can win this conference with him at quarterback.
And even with Giddens leaving too, now you're hoping Dylan Edwards could be the next DJ Giddens. Now you're hoping hopefully that guy can be a 13
It's not the same type of back.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you're hoping a 1,300-yard guy could be a Dylan Edwards. Like, that's a dangerous place to be for Kansas State, honestly. Don't forget the most impressive part, though, in this Iowa State victory.
I'll take Iowa State's highest graded player, safety, to Sean James, this young player who I think made a big impact in this game, played his second most snaps of the season this week, and made an impact at safety. 8 tackles, 3 defensive stops, allowed just 1 catch. It was a 7-yard touchdown, but that was the only catch he allowed. And I think a huge play, maybe the biggest play in this game, he's the guy who punched out. He forced the Keegan Johnson fumble in the second quarter that Iowa State eventually scored on to make it 17-7. So I'll go with Sean James, Iowa State's highest graded player.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Jontez Williams. Wasn't the highest graded player, but he had a really good game in this one. 3 forced incompletions, only 2 allowed catches for 26 yards. Iowa State secondary has been easily the biggest strength of this team, besides the receiving core probably all year, and he's been a major reason for it. He's an 84.2 coverage grade on the season, and Iowa State as a team is 11th in the nation in coverage grade at 90.5. So Jontez Williams, is he the best defensive back on Iowa State? I wouldn't say so, but he was probably the best one yesterday. He's had a really good year as well, with an 84.2 coverage grade in the season.
They got 3 really good ones, don't they? When you've got Darian Porter and Miles Purchase and Jontez Williams, I mean, that'll do. And again, you mentioned it. It's a team that they're tied with Colorado for the lead in the Big 12 in coverage grade, and they're going to need that. They are going to need that this week because the team they're about to play is raging hot on offense, and we saw that again yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Arizona State now taking on Iowa State, because Arizona State beating Arizona 49-7. They dominated their in-state rival yesterday. Let's go over the highest graded players, starting off with the Arizona State Sun Devils. Starting off with wide receiver Jordan Tyson, who Iowa State secondary is going to have a lot with their hands full with him next week, a 91.4 grade. Emmett Boley, 91.2. Cam Scadaboo, 87. Jordan Crook, 75.4. Miles Rouser, 71.8. And Sam Levitt, 80.6 grade. Let's go over to Arizona with their highest grade players in this loss for the Wildcats. Trey Smith, 72.4. Josh Baker, 71.7. Wendell Moe, 69.8. Lance Kennelly, 69.5. Jono Price, 68.1. And Noah Fafita, also the 68.1 grade. Dawn, for you, what told the story in this Arizona State blowout victory?
Well, we felt it right to review the 2 games of the 2 teams that made the Big 12 title game, and this one is the easiest one. Arizona State just absolutely whacked Arizona, and they got their revenge. Remember last year, Arizona won this game 59-23, and Arizona State, in the progress they've made, they turn around and win this one 49-7. That's just incredible stuff. And I had to go and look at this, an 89.1 offensive grade as a team. The best by Arizona State in PFF college history. That goes back to 2014. Wow. The game that they beat. This is a wild thing to show you how far we've come in college football here. Their previous record was in 2020 against Arizona. They actually dropped 70 points in that game. You know what happened in that game? This is just a fun thing I just wanted to throw out there. Jaden Daniels threw a touchdown to Ricky Pearsall.
Oh, hell yeah.
And Rashad White ran for 3 touchdowns on the ground.
Ayuk wasn't there on that team, right?
No, that was the year before. It was the year after he was drafted. Yeah. Think about what I just said.
That's absurd.
That's the next best game was against Arizona when they had Jaden Daniels, Ricky Pearsall, Johnny Wilson, and
Johnny Wilson was there too.
And Rashad White. Imagine how much talent they had. Look at the amount of talent they had on that team, right? But that was the previous one, and this one, this was Arizona State's highest graded offensive game. I just want to point out this first half real quick. Okay, I mean, they put this game away. They left no doubt. 375 yards on 40 first half plays, a 0.748 EPA per play. Cam Scadaboo in the first half, 16 carries, 113 yards, 3 touchdowns, 81.1 rushing grade. And Jordan Tyson is the hottest receiver in the country right now. This is just the first half, 7 catches, 137 yards, and a 92 receiving grade. I mean, this trifecta, Levitt, Scadaboo, Tyson. That's a monster.
Yeah.
It's a monster. 8 drives in this game with the starting offense on the field, all right? Put the backups in for the last couple. 8 drives, 6 touchdowns, 1 punt, 1 missed field goal. That's where we're at with Arizona State's offense right now. It's incredible what they're doing, what they've been doing for the last 6-7 weeks outside of the Cincinnati game where Leavitt was hurt. The development of these 3 guys, and we knew Scadaboo was good coming into the season, but Leavitt and Tyson, especially giving them the passing threat and an elite passing threat right now, they're playing. I know Iowa State is in with them, and we had a 4-way tie at the top and all. Arizona State's playing the best football in the conference, and they've been doing it, honestly, for 6-7 weeks.
Yeah, and another set to tell story of that is that of 10-plus yard plays, Arizona State had 22 of them. Arizona had 8. 8. Almost triple Arizona State what they had in terms of 10-plus yard plays. Arizona, offensively and defensively, got destroyed in this game. It is a good old-fashioned ass whooping, honestly. Arizona State, like I said, .595 EPA per play, 89.1 offensive grade. Arizona, negative .350 EPA per play, 58.3 offensive grade. I mean, there's not a lot to go into here. They got killed. This really was just demolition on both sides of the football with Arizona State winning. So, yeah, when you have almost triple the amount of 10-plus yard plays that the opposing team has, you're most likely going to dominate a game. That's what Arizona State did in this one.
Yep, they left no doubt. They got their revenge. They took care of business. And now the hottest team in the Big 12 is into the Big 12 title game. It's going to be a fun game. I think there's a lot of different dimensions in this game that are going to be very interesting. But I got to be honest, from what I've seen from both teams lately, and I know Iowa State's been skidding by in some close games, I think first impression I have to favor the Sun Devils next week because they're just raging hot on offense, and even on defense right now. They're playing better. They've been playing better all season. I think they're coming together. They've come together at the right time, and they've got one more win to go. The winner's going to get in the playoff. We know Iowa State's capable of a lot, especially offensively. Higgins, Knoll, Sama, and Hansen at running back, and Rocco Beck's a little bit of a roller coaster, but no, I think right this minute, just first glance, and we're going to dig into some things in the preview and all that, but I think first glance, I would favor Arizona State in this matchup. They're playing such good football.
And how about going 3-9 in back-to-back years, and now all of a sudden you're one game away from making the playoff.
And picked by the media to be dead last in the conference. My most impressive, I know normally we do something in the game, the players on the field, but it's Kenny Dillingham. Yeah. I think, look, we'll see if it's Kurt Cignetti. We'll see if it's maybe Kalani Sitake. We'll see. Kenny Dillingham is square in the conversation for National Coach of the Year. And honestly, if they handed it to him, I wouldn't blame him one bit. Especially if he wins the conference. If Arizona State, of all teams, that might have been the last team I would have picked in the Power Four to make the playoff this season, is Arizona State. And look, again, they were predicted to finish last. The whole Big 12 got turned upside down. I mean, when you look at the preseason projections, but what he's done with this team that was thought to not have a ton of talent, and you bring in a redshirt freshman quarterback and Sam Leavitt who was cast off by Michigan State, and you build it and you develop this team the way that he has, unreal job. There may be a couple equal, but I don't think there's been a better coaching job this year than Kenny Dillingham. And again, I think this last game sums it up. They lost this game 59-23 last year. They won it 49-7 this year. And I know Arizona's had their downfall, but that's incredible. Yeah, I don't even know what else to say about it. It's just a terrific story, and one of the stories of college football. And again, like we mentioned, one of these two teams is going to be in the college football playoff, and that's a whole lot of fun. Credit also, I want to mention too, with Iowa State, their first 10-win season ever.
Wow.
2 big-time stories in the Big 12, and it took, boy, what a roller coaster it was to get there. Huh?
Yeah, it was outstanding. Yeah, my most impressive part is Cam Scadaboo, 177 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 115 yards after contact, nearly a 30% forced missed tackle rate, averaged over 8 yards per carry, 5.5 yards after contact per carry, also caught a pass for 8 yards as well on a first down. He's the engine of this offense, and he is the biggest reason, besides Kenny Dillingham obviously turning around, but he is the biggest reason from going from the bottom of the Big 12 in the preseason ranking to making the conference title game and potentially the college football playoff. It would not be anywhere close to this kind of team without Cam Scadaboo leading the way, so he was outstanding.
He is the heart and soul and attitude of it, for sure, and they have built it around him, and they've done a hell of a job of it.
Yep. So Arizona State going to the Big 12 championship game in their first year in the conference, going against Arizona. How about the RIP of the Pac-12, man? Honestly, you got Oregon going to the Big 10 title game. You got Arizona State going to the Big 12 title game as well. Just It sucks what's going on.
Well, can I throw out something? I believe it was Texas Tech coach Joey McGuire said yesterday after their game. I didn't realize this. It is possible between Oregon, SMU, Texas, and Arizona State that four teams will win the Power Four conferences in their first year in conference.
Wow.
That 4 newcomers will win all 4 conferences. It's entirely possible. Oregon, Texas, SMU, and Arizona State. And those, and maybe not Texas, but the other 3 are probably going to be favored to win these games. And Texas, it's probably still going to be a pretty tight spread despite the first game.
Yeah, I don't know what the spread will be for that. We'll have to look at that, but
we'll look at it. But it's entirely possible that with all of the realignment and everything we've seen, that 4 first-year teams in their new conferences win their conference.
It's a hell of a stat, honestly. Texas is favored by 2.5, by the way.
Texas is favored.
So every single newcomer is favored in their conference.
Wow. That's impressive.
It's insane. That's really actually a really cool stat. Yeah, I didn't even know that. So that's insane. But let's go over, Dalton, some standouts of the week outside of these 8 games during rivalry week. Who else impressed you in the sport of college football?
Okay, so I tried to actually keep this to some teams that maybe playoff relevant, but there's a guy down in North Carolina I do not want us to forget about. And I know they lost, and that was another flag planting fight and all this stuff, but Amarion Hampton, can we just respect the season that he's had and the game that he had against NC State yesterday? 22 carries for 185 and a touchdown, forced 10 missed tackles. 4 catches for 78 yards and a touchdown. All right, we're talking about 263 total yards and 2 touchdowns on 26 touches, more than 10 per touch. Amarion Hampton, I think, is pretty solidified behind Ashton Jeanty as the second best running back in this draft class. And second most yards this season behind Jeanty, second most yards after contact behind Jeanty. I believe the number is 1,660 rushing yards for Hampton this year on a team that had nothing else going for it, and I believe they went 6-6, and they're looking for a new head coach now. Hampton, just a beast. Absolutely, there's nothing much else I can say about him. I think he's going to go in the top 50 of this draft. I think he's the second best running back in this draft behind Ashton Jeanty. Just incredible stuff he's done all year despite all the adversity around him.
He and Caleb Johnson just getting screwed by Ashton Jeanty. These are 2 awesome running back years. It would win a Doak Walker award in any other year, and it's just like, well, you have Ashton Jeanty, so you can't do it. Sorry.
Yeah, no, Hampton, and this is 2 years in a row now. Just incredible with Hampton. He's a terrific football player. I even wonder if he's been so good if some team on the back end of the first round might look at him because he's just this running back class is going to be insane, this draft class. And Hampton, though, I think is pretty solidly, for me, RB2.
Well, yeah, it was insane going into the year, but also you got to remember, 2 of the top guys going into the year, and Ollie Gordon and Quinshon Judkins. Gordon especially has been extremely disappointing, and Judkins has had a good year either. So now all of a sudden you got, the guy in Jeanty who we knew before, who's obviously RB1 by a mile, but like you said, Hampton was also one of the top guys going into the year. And he's the only one out of those other 3 that's actually had a great year.
I think we had him 3rd in our preseason rankings. I think we had Hampton 3rd. And he lived up to every bit of it. He would end the season 2nd now if we did it again behind Ashton. I mean, just an incredible year for an incredible player. He's going to be a good player in the NFL. I mean, just an absolute monster the Tar Heels had the last couple of years at running back.
Like I said, he'd win the Doak Walker Award if it wasn't for Ashton Jeanty, and Ashton Jeanty would win the Heisman Trophy if it wasn't for Travis Hunter. So for the last time this year, we're highlighting Travis Hunter here. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your Heisman Trophy winner, your 2024 Heisman Trophy winner. Dalton, in this game against Oklahoma State. Yeah, sorry, Eli. Eli booed me from back there because he has a very juicy Ashton Jeanty Heisman bet. I think it's 75-1 he has Ashton Jeanty Heisman bet, unfortunately. Didn't cash out, Eli, like we told you time and time again to do so. But
he hates listening to us. He has to do it too much. He only listens to us because
he does also have a Travis Hunter Heisman bet. Not as profitable as the Ashton Jeanty one, but still he's making some money off Travis Hunter.
He'll be fine. Don't let him convince you he won't.
But Travis Hunter is making a lot of money in the NFL. He might be the number 1 overall pick, and in this game it's Oklahoma State in a 52-0 win. 10 of 14 targets he caught them for 116 yards and 3 touchdowns. 2 catches allowed for 18 yards on 35 coverage snaps. He also had an interception in the game, a dropped interception in that game, and 2 forced incompletions. Dalton, this year, he finished the season with an 88.3 receiving grade and a 90.9 coverage grade. 5th best receiving grade in the nation among all wide receivers. 2nd best coverage grade in the nation among all corners, despite all of the bad faith bullshit arguments you saw on Twitter saying this guy's he's just doing cardio. His snap count is the reason why he's winning the Heisman. He's a top 5 player in the country at 2 separate positions on 2 different sides of the football. Dalton, I'm saying right now, and I know there's a lot of Ashton fans, a lot of Eli back there is going to hate me for saying this. This is going to go down one of the greatest Heisman seasons we've ever seen. Ever. We've never, ever seen this before. Missed me with the Charles Woodson stuff. He had 200 yards for Michigan that one year. Travis Hunter has 1,200 yards this year, while also being a top 3 corner in college football. This is the best player in college football, and this will go down as one of the greatest Heisman seasons we've ever seen. This is one of the greatest seasons we've ever seen by a college football player. I'll say it right now. We have never seen a guy be this fucking good on 2 sides of the football like Travis Hunter. He is the Heisman Trophy winner, without a doubt, in my opinion.
Agreed. Yeah, no, I mean, it's just, and he led the Big 12 in touchdown catches?
I think so.
Little things like that help too. But no, I'm with you. If you have any thought that he's just like, he's pretty decent at both spots.
He's doing cardio.
Yeah,
no. Top 5 player in the country, 2 different positions.
Best player in the country. Best just shoot.
And if you don't need a quarterback and you're the number 1 overall pick, there's no choice. There's no choice. Even if you need a quarterback, you might be like, hey, we're getting a receiver and corner here.
Depends what you think of the quarterbacks. That's a whole different argument. No, best player in the country should win the Heisman. If he doesn't, that would be really something if he didn't.
Yeah.
I think unless Jinty went out against UNLV and ran for 400 yards.
Also, let's be honest here. What is he, like minus 10,000 right now? Vegas wouldn't be willing to get screwed like that. Like Jinty's like plus 3,000 or 4,000 right now. They would not be willing to get screwed unless they knew he was winning the Heisman.
It's Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
All right. Second, let's move on here. That argument should be done with.
Eli's about to come in here and strangle me after that.
I'll tell you something. Is Oregon the least talked about number 1 team in the country?
They might be. They just take care of business every week, honestly.
They do, and they took care of business again against Washington. I'll tell you who took care of business. Their left tackle, Josh Connerly Jr. 89.3 overall grade in this game, his best of the season, dominating Washington up front. 91.3 run blocking grade, the highest of any offensive tackle in the country this week. I'll tell you what, Oregon, we keep arguing about Ohio State and Alabama and the SEC and Texas and the Ace and everything else, and Oregon's sitting there as the one undefeated team left. The only one left, and they're number 1 in the country.
Not for long.
And they got a pretty darn good quarterback. Easy now. They got a pretty darn good quarterback, and they got a good group of weapons and a defense, and they got a darn good left tackle, too, and Josh Connerly wanted to shout him out. Highest run blocking grade of any offensive tackle this week. Just blew Washington out of the water.
Insane. They're so good, dude. I'm so nervous for next week. We're going to be there, too. And I think my entire family is flying in for that game. So I'm going to house them for the whole weekend.
I think we do have to ask ourselves if we're just actually not talking about probably the best team in the country enough in Oregon. I mean,
we kept trying to find Ohio State, and then now Ohio State lost to Michigan. It's like, no, they're the best team.
It feels like we've spent 6 weeks trying to find a reason for it not to be Oregon, and maybe it just is.
Maybe it's just Oregon. Yeah.
It might just be. They might just be the best team in the country. They got a little bit of everything.
They really are. My guy is Max Brosmer, the quarterback from Minnesota. So the numbers he had in this game aren't ridiculous against Wisconsin in a 24-7 victory. But it's worth diving a little deeper. So he was 16 for 24, 188 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 picks. So look at that, whatever. But he had a 94.4 passing grade against Wisconsin. 2 big-time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays, 89.5% adjusted completion percentage. Again, your completion rate plus any drops that your receivers have. So basically 90% of his passes were on target. And also, Dalton, 90% of passes on target, his average depth of target was 11 yards downfield. He was throwing the ball downfield and was still 90% accurate on them as well. So also had a rushing touchdown in this game. His performance against Wisconsin was one of the biggest reasons why, of course the defense is great too, but one of the biggest reasons why Minnesota won the Axe in what is, I don't know if you knew this, the oldest rivalry in the FBS between Minnesota and Wisconsin. So big time rivalry. And Max Brosmer, again, the traditional stats don't jump off this page, but that's why we exist here at PFF. He had a hell of a game against Wisconsin. I want to shout him out here.
He had a hell of a season.
You did.
Honestly, he really did. And coming up to this level from New Hampshire and actually playing better.
You were grinding that New Hampshire tape. Remember,
I was.
You texted me back in June saying, hey, this Brosmer guy is actually pretty good.
And I got to be honest, he was pretty good, and this was the best football he's played, even better than at any point at New Hampshire. He had an excellent season in Minnesota. Look, they're always tough, and I know they have a hard time breaking through the top level of the Big Ten, but they had another good season under PJ Fleck, and Brosmer was a big reason. I'm going to stay in the Big Ten for a team that's had a really good season and it would feel wrong to not talk about the Indiana Hoosiers. And I know they had the easy assignment against Purdue, and they won, 66-0, was it? I think it was in the snow. I mean, they took care of business. They also left no doubt. A guy I really like, I want to highlight, I mentioned this going into the year, Jalen Walker at linebacker.
Yeah, monster.
This is very quietly one of the best linebackers in the country, and I know it's Purdue, but 92.8 overall grade, 6 pressures, 2 sacks, an interception, a forced fumble, just a little bit of everything. And Max, I had to go back his last 3 years because he was spectacular the last 2 years under Signetti at James Madison. The only linebacker in the country over the last 3 years with an 85 run defense grade, an 85 coverage grade, and an 85 pass rush grade.
Damn.
Straight up one of the best linebackers in the country. And look, Indiana's had a lot of the best things in the country this year. You talk about Mikael Kamara and Curtis Rourke and the receivers, but I want us to not forget Jalen Walker at linebacker. He's a little undersized, but I think he's just a terrific football player, and he shows up every week for him.
And there's been a drought of linebackers in the NFL and in college football. And really a big part of that is because of how hard it is to play linebacker in today's day and age. You got to be a good run defender. You can't be a liability in coverage. You can't be a liability as a passer. You can't be a liability in anything on defense, really. And for a guy like that, you just said 85 plus in everything. That's important, and that might
one of the very few who can do all of it.
And that's like, and you see like Fred Warner dominating because he can do everything too. Like, I'm not saying he's a Fred Warner, but like I'm saying in the NFL, even undersized like he is, they might look at that and be like, hey, this guy can still do everything we want, right? So he might be going a lot higher in the draft because of that, honestly, because he could do everything for the Indiana defense.
Linebacker, I think, is a real crapshoot this year, and Walker's a guy I would take a chance on.
I feel like it's been a crapshoot for like multiple years now, honestly. And I think it really is just a product of where the game's heading, where it's just so hard to play linebacker nowadays in the NFL and in college football, honestly, with how spread out offenses are, really. But my last guy I'm talking about is Donovan Ezeraku, the edge defender for Boston College. Dude, he has been unbelievable. We have not talked about him enough this year because Boston College's year has been whatever. He has not been whatever, though. He has been unbelievable this year. 91.9 grade in the 34-23 win over Pittsburgh. He had 4 sacks against the Panthers. Another 5 quarterback hits. He had 9 total knockdowns in this game to go along with 12 total pressures against Pittsburgh. Also, if that's not enough, 3 run defense stops and a tackle for loss as well against Pittsburgh. He has been a superstar. Like I said before, with Jalen Walker being good at everything, he's good at everything. He has an 85-plus grade in run defense and in pass rushing. He's the only edge in the Power 4 who's 85-plus in both. Dalton, we're going to put together an All-America team in the next couple weeks, probably. He might be one of the first-team All-American edges this year.
He's been incredible. I'll tell you what, Nate Yarnell's going to have nightmares.
Oh, my God.
About 12 pressures and 4 sacks is ridiculous.
And 5 hits, yeah.
And I'll tell you what, that's the type of tape that shoots you up a draft board, too. He's another guy who might be a top 50 type of guy.
I was just going to say, I think before he's like a day 3 pick. He had a good year, a really good year last year. I'm not taking that away from him. But now I'd say he's a second-round pick now. He's a second-round pick.
It's a guy like him. The more I look at this, I think defensive line, especially off the edge, is, I think, the most talented position group in this draft coming up. And it's because of guys like this that you might be able to get in the second or even early third round that they're wicked pass rushers. Ezeraku's he's an awesome football player. And he just fits what Boston College wanted to do all this time, right?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
An unreal pass rusher and an unreal run defender, too. It's not like he's like a liability in one of them. Like, he is an unbelievable football player. And I think he has played his way now into the second round of the NFL draft. I really think he has. He has been really, really good for Boston College and might be a first-team All-American edge defender for us at the end of the year. We'll see what happens with our All-American team coming out very soon. But, Don, we got to go over the updated college football playoff after what was an insane rivalry week in college football. Let's go over what we think the playoff should look like as of right now, and at least what I think it should look like. So we might disagree a little bit. We'll talk about this in a second. But the first-round buys, Oregon, Texas, SMU, Boise State. We're reminding you guys, the top 4 right there aren't necessarily the top 4 overall teams in my ranking, but they're the 4 highest ranked, what we think would be the conference champions as of right now. So that is how the 4 highest ranked conference champions look right there. Does that look correct to you? Anything you would change there or no?
Nope.
All right, let's go over to the first round then, see if you change anything there with my first round matchups as of right now. I got number 5, Georgia against number 12, Arizona State, the Big 12 champion. Penn State against Alabama, now back into the playoff after Miami losing to Syracuse. Notre Dame going against Indiana in the battle for the state of Indiana, and Ohio State going against Tennessee in the 8-9 matchup. Anything there that you would change?
So I have three things. One, I'm a little surprised. Three, yeah. I'm one of them surprised me. I'm a little surprised you had Ohio State behind Penn State and Notre Dame. I know it's a bad loss to Michigan, but I figured maybe the head-to-head would play a part in it.
I did almost think about it, but I was like,
That's a weird shuffling when we were going through it, is ordering those teams and even Tennessee about where they're going to be, especially considering the way Ohio State looked in that loss. But I think you're picking. You're splitting hairs there.
No, that was tough. Because
that group, you're splitting hairs. I think Notre Dame's probably locked in at 5, right? At this point, with what the committee's, and the resume, we'll see. But second, the debate between, I think, Alabama and South Carolina. And maybe there's some debate still with Miami. I just don't think the resume with Miami stacks up, even though those two teams have the extra loss. I think it's the one time for me where this season I've kind of pushed back against the SEC is better narrative, but it's more about I just don't know what Miami's done that's been all that impressive. Even a lot of their wins, very tight to Virginia Tech, very tight to Cal, and, just not – they've had spurts where they've looked great, offensively especially, but their defense not there, the resume not there. I think Miami's out, personally. I think that last spot, there is a big debate between if it comes down to Alabama and South Carolina.
Yeah.
Because Alabama did beat them, but it was extremely tight, went down to the wire. Sellers threw an interception at the end in the end zone, right? The other thing for me, and I think here's the biggest one for me the more I was thinking about this, and there was some talk about if Clemson beats SMU, is SMU out? And I think they should absolutely not be. I think, for me personally, SMU I think is a lock to make unless they go in there and for some reason lose by like 30 or 40, which is not happening. I'm sorry, that Clemson's not beating them by like 30 or 40, whatever. They've proven they're not going to do that to a good team. Honestly, I think SMU's going to win anyway. I'm probably going to pick them to win on Tuesday unless I see something weird. I think SMU's a lock.
Yeah,
I think win or lose, I think they should be a lock. If you look at their resume at 11-1 compared to, say, Notre Dame's resume at 11-1, it's awfully similar. And their loss wasn't to Northern Illinois. Their loss was to BYU, who will finish the season ranked inside the top 20. I believe, somewhere in. I mean, a BYU team that went 10-2, and they lost by a field goal when they didn't know at the time who they were playing at quarterback. Once they fully committed to Kevin Jennings, they became a top 10 team in the country.
Yeah.
It may be the best defense in the ACC. It may be the best offense in the – they might just be straight up the best team in the ACC, and they have one more game to go and prove it. But I think when you look at 11-1, especially compared to a team like a Notre Dame or a Penn State, SMU's a lock.
Yeah,
for me. I just think even if they lose, and if Clemson beats them and gets one of the top 4 spots –
Alabama's out then.
I think it's Alabama and South Carolina. It should be at the expense of not SMU. If you want to make SMU a road team and put them at number, I don't care, 11 or 12 or whatever, fine. SMU, to me, should be a lock. Go ahead.
Yeah, these are the first 4 out, just to kind of go over. South Carolina just out, BYU's just out, Miami's just out, and Iowa State's just out. That's a good point by you, Dalton, because I agree with you. Because then it's like SMU, it's like, all right, why are we even playing this week then? Because they're already in. If they didn't play in the ACC title game, they'd be in at 11-1.
And I think a big thing was even them taking care of business. They beat Cal 38-6 yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay, and we've seen Cal play Miami tight and play some other tight games, and they went out and dominated in a game where the conference record didn't matter, but they knew that possibility still mattered, because SMU at 10-2 and then a loss at 10-3, then I'd go, oh shoot, they're probably not getting in. At 11-1, with to me a very similar, if not better, resume to Penn State and to Notre Dame. And we're not really talking about those two. We're not questioning anything about those two teams at 11-1. SMU, will they be punished in the sense of they'll be down at 10, 11, 12 if they lose? Yeah, fine. But they should be in. There is zero reason SMU should miss, even if they lose to Clemson.
I'm with you.
The only way is if Clemson were to beat them 45-10, which they're not going to do that.
No, but even if they do, though, they're in.
Probably.
They're 11-2. I mean, you can't punish an 11-1 team and put in a 9-3 team just for playing in a conference title game.
I think they would think about it.
It'd be BS if they did that. It'd be complete BS. Because then it's like, if you're SMU, it's like, why do we even play in this game then?
Agreed.
Because we've been in anyways. So I'm with that. I think SMU's absolutely in.
That's the biggest takeaway actually for me yesterday, is that Miami is out.
Yeah, Miami's out.
South Carolina has a shot, and SMU should be a lock, a stone cold lock. Absolutely. I think, and now what Bama and South Carolina are hoping for is that SMU wins that, and they don't even get to that scenario because they'll be the two teams shut out now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Bama and South Carolina, it just comes down to that. Because everything else is, Oregon, Penn State, no matter who wins, they're both in. You look at Texas, Georgia, no matter who wins, they're both in. Big 12, the winner of that game's in. The loser's out.
And the funny part is it's going to be decided in this week's ranking. Not next week.
No,
not actual selection.
No,
Sunday.
We'll find out.
If they rank Bama ahead of South Carolina this week,
it won't change.
They're not flipping it. They're not going to do that when neither team played. So we're going to find out this week who the last team in would be, and then that team is begging for an SMU win because that's Clemson stealing a spot there. Is what
really it just makes sense what the playoff will look like. We'll know pretty solidly. Like, hey, yes, Alabama/South Carolina is in right now, but will change if Clemson beats SMU.
The two biggest things of suspense this week are Alabama, South Carolina, and the order, like I mentioned before, with Ohio State losing and who might be getting home games here.
Yeah,
that'll be the biggest. And then where the loser of Texas, Georgia falls in that mix also.
Yeah,
and who's getting a bye? I mean, these conference title games are going to be fun.
Yeah, and they would never do this. I told you this is my half-baked idea, but I think Clemson's resume is not good at all. I don't even have it in my top 25. I'll say it right now.
Okay, fine.
But if they win, what if Army beats Tulane? They would never do it. It won't happen.
They shouldn't do it.
But my half-baked thing I was thinking about this morning when I was, of 2 hours of sleep, maybe I'm dead wrong here, but I was like, I might just put Army in over Clemson and make 5 champions. I don't think Clemson's resume sucks. It's not a good resume
You're right.
at all.
But it's
a horrible resume.
But them beating SMU alone might be better.
It might be
better than
and
Army's
it probably would jump Army overall. But I'm looking at 11-1 Army versus a 10-3 Clemson.
And the committee will still have Clemson ranked after this.
No, they will. Then again, this is a moot point.
They're probably still going to be inside the top.
It's a moot point because I think there's no way it would happen that the committee would do it. But I personally, I would think about it.
I
would think about it.
I get what you're getting at because the committee is higher on Clemson.
And I think it's worth a conversation. I don't think it's a complete non-thing.
I think you would have had a better case if Tulane had beaten Memphis and then Tulane did it. You would have had a better case there.
I look at Clemson's resume. I'm like, dude.
I know
nothing close.
I don't think they're beating SMU. I think SMU to this point has proven they're the best team in the ACC.
Yeah,
and they just have to prove it one more time.
Yeah. So basically, it really just comes down to whether it be Alabama or South Carolina, and then it comes down to if Clemson can beat SMU. Because if they do, then both SMU and Clemson will probably be in, and then Bama, South Carolina will be out. But if SMU takes care of business, then either Bama or South Carolina will get into the college football playoff.
Boy, do we have a slate of these conference title games, and they're going to be so much fun. We got a Texas-Georgia rematch in the SEC. We've got Oregon and your Penn State Nittany Lions who found a way to get through the Ohio State loss and get one more shot in primetime. We'll be there in Indy. The Big 12, as we mentioned, Arizona State and Iowa State, SMU Clemson in the ACC. We got a de facto playoff game in the Mountain West that I absolutely love. We get a rematch of Boise State, UNLV. Maybe Eli gets his Heisman chances there with Ashton Jeanty if he has some crazy game. And then the rest of the group of 5, I think you got some interesting games here too. Tulane playing Army. Both had really good seasons. You had Tulane coming off a loss to Memphis that really hurt them. Western Kentucky and Jacksonville State going to play for the second week in a row, and now Jacksonville State might have an issue with an injury to their quarterback. Ohio and Miami. Ohio is a fun game in the MAC. And did you see Marshall last night clinching?
Yeah, insane.
Did you watch the end of that game?
No, I didn't see the end of it, but
double overtime. All right, they're going to play Louisiana now in the Sun Belt, and they're going through computer rankings today to see where the game is at. But playing James Madison.
At Louisiana.
They announced it? Okay, it's at Louisiana then. Marshall, down 21-0, comes all the way back. The game is tied at 24, end of regulation. Game-winning field goal, blocked. Go to double overtime, run a Philly special on a 2-point play to beat James Madison, getting the Sun Belt title game. We're previewing all 9 conference title games. It's going to be a boatload of fun, a whole lot of implications, and I'm telling you, I can't wait for this Boise UNLV game. I know there's bigger games on the slate, but I think that's going to be incredible.
I can't wait to dive into all the teams that we have not talked about at all this year. There's so many teams that we just not talked about that are in these conference title games now, because we obviously try to focus most on what's going to affect the college football playoff. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about all 9 of these conference title games on Tuesday night, which of course our previous show Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Eastern time, we're previewing all 9 conference title games that will decide the playoff seeding in college football. Also decide who the conference champions are in college football as well. And also, just to remind you guys, for anyone who doesn't watch the preview show on Tuesday night, next week's show is Sunday morning after the conference title games. Not at the same time, though. We haven't decided exactly what time it is. I think we're going to do like 10:30.
Somewhere around there, because we're going to get the playoff reaction going. When
it's not because we want to sleep in a little more as part of it, but also we got to get to the college football playoff reaction, and the bracket will be revealed at noon. So we want to be live on the show during the bracket reveal. So that's why we're starting about an hour and a half later next week. I think like 10:30, I think is what we decided on for next week's show. So about 90 minutes after the normal time for next week's review show. Preview show, still the same time though, 6 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday night, previewing again all 9 conference title games and what should be an amazing weekend of college football next week. But it was an amazing rivalry weekend of college football this week. For our producers back there, Eli and Tyler, for Dalton Wasserman, I'm Max Chadwick. We'll see you guys Tuesday night at 6 p.m. for our conference championship preview show.